Yes, Commissioner Cardoza,
Here.
Commissioner Flores.
Here.
Commissioner Jeffrey,
Here.
Commissioner Martin.
Here.
Commissioner Sherman.
Here.
Vice Chair Hoff.
Here.
Chair Donaldson.
Here.
All 7 commissioners are present.
Okay, would rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. This is the time on the agenda for public comment for items that are not on our formal agenda. Is there anyone wishing to speak to the commission? Michael.
Commissioners,
Good evening. Michael Guina, Assistant City Attorney. I just wanted to let you know that I've been assigned to other projects in the office. Mike Biddle, the City Attorney, has shuffled around some of our projects, and so I'm going to be working more on some of the redevelopment projects and other project areas that we have in the offices. And as a result, I will no longer be staffing the Planning Commission. I will no longer be advising you, but I leave you in very capable hands. Abby Bilkus will be advising you, and you'll see me from time to time as well as I'll be working on other projects that will be coming before you. But I wanted to take this opportunity to let you know that, and to tell you that it's been a real pleasure and an honor for me to be able to provide advice to you over the last couple of years. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
We will miss
We'll
you.
see you.
You've given us lots of
You're
good
just going
advice.
downstairs.
Okay. We have the action recap
Now we
from
can-
June
yeah,
25th.
We can beat up on Abby.
I'd like to note one correction to the action recap. I'm not sure this was explicitly said at the June 25th meeting, but 3 commissioners, Commissioners Flores, Martin, and Donaldson, were absent from the May 28th meeting, and therefore should have recused or abstained, rather, on the approval of the minutes of the May 28th meeting. So the minutes of the June 25th meeting should reflect abstentions by 3 commissioners on the approval of the May 28th action recap.
Is there anyone wish to move approval of the minutes?
I'll move with the modification. I'll second.
Okay, without objection, we approve the minutes. So now we come to the exciting election of officers. It's time to pass the torch on that. Do we have any nominations for the chairpersonship?
Do the new members have to be sworn in?
No. The reappointments, you mean?
Yeah.
No, that's only when you're a new commissioner that needs to be done.
I move Art Hoff.
I'll second.
Okay, let's do these one at a time. Let's have the vote for the chairperson position.
I'm sorry, I missed the motion and the second. Who was that?
Buzz moved and Patty seconded.
Okay. Do you want to take a vote, or do you want to have other nominations?
Any other nominations?
By acclamation?
Look like it.
By acclamation.
By acclamation, I guess we have a new chair of the committee here, the commission.
Congratulations, Art.
Congratulations.
And thank you.
I want to say how much I appreciate the work. I'm looking forward to it.
And before I turn over the gavel, how about any nomination for vice chair?
Oh, God, who wants this?
nominate Frank Flores. I'll second. Okay.
That,
I think-
Jim, did you second?
I think he actually said the whole sentence, so go ahead, John.
So it was Commissioner Cardoza and Commissioner Sherman? Is that right? Okay.
Thank you, Buzz.
Okay.
You want to do any other nominations, or is this by acclamation as well?
By acclamation, I would think, yeah.
I don't see anyone shaking their heads, so I guess that's by acclamation. And I will turn over the gavel.
Good job, Gail.
So I got to start right away.
Yep.
That's right.
You're on the job now.
So where did we leave this off? Election of officers, okay. The next item on the agenda is the director's report, please.
All right. Well, first, I want to say that it's a good thing the city council reappointed Commissioners Hoff and Flores last night.
Leaderless.
First, I'd like to report to you on recent city council actions. As you know, the council does not meet the first Tuesday of July. They take a recess. So they've only had one meeting since your last meeting, and that was day before yesterday, Tuesday, July 21st. As I noted, they did reappoint Commissioners Hoff and Flores to additional 3-year terms until June 30th of 2012. And I would note that there were 6 other applicants for those 2 seats, so it was stiff competition, and Commissioners Flores and Hoff came out ahead, so I'd like to take the opportunity to congratulate both of you, both on your reappointment and now as your election as chair and vice chair.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations. The Adeline Market project, as you may have heard, was appealed. Your approval at the last meeting has been appealed by 3 Triangle residents. At their meeting on Tuesday night, the City Council set the hearing date for August 4th, which is the next council meeting. Under the zoning ordinance, the commission is entitled to have a representative at that meeting. So if you wish to send somebody to that council meeting to explain your approval of that project, you are certainly entitled to do that. The council also discussed the Doyle Hollis Park project, and they discussed a grand opening ceremony, but they were not able to settle on a date for that. So that's still being discussed, and it will be presumably sometime either in August or early September, and an announcement about the date will be forthcoming. On the budget, the council approved budget reductions for this current fiscal year that we're in, fiscal year 09-10, which started on July 1st. As you know, because of our 2-year budget process, that budget for this fiscal year was previously approved by the council, but on Tuesday they approved reductions because of the current economic situation. Citywide, the operating budget reductions total over $1 million. In the planning and building department, we have eliminated 1 contract building inspector because of the slowdown in construction activity. And we've also made some additional cuts in other areas. One of those areas is planning commission compensation. That compensation has been dropped from the stipulated $200 a month to $100 a month. And actually that is the same as it was last year, but as you may recall, the council didn't approve the budget cuts last year until halfway through the year, when you had already received $200 a month for the first 6 months. So that resulted in you getting nothing for the later 6 months of the year, which averaged out to $100. But this year you will be receiving $100 from the beginning of the year each month. And the paperwork to reinstate those payments has already been put in, so you should be seeing those payments shortly. That's for the 4 commissioners who have opted to receive compensation. On the general plan, we are on track to bring the general plan to you for consideration at your next meeting on August 27th, and that is going to include the final EIR, the analysis of floor area ratio in the residential areas that you have requested, the general plan itself, of course, as well as interim zoning regulations to implement it until the new zoning ordinance is adopted. So we'll have a package of all that stuff for you at your next meeting on August 27th.
Charlie, is there any chance that we could get the information on the floor area ratio earlier than what we normally receive it?
We'll do our best.
That would be appreciated.
We're
Thank
working
you.
on it. And the General Plan and Zoning Update Steering Committee, now having completed the general plan, is turning its attention to the new zoning ordinance. So at their meeting next Tuesday, July 28th at 6:30 in this room, they will hold a meeting to discuss the first module of the zoning ordinance update, which is the bonus point system for density, height, and floor area ratio. So we will be seeing some of you next Tuesday night to discuss the point system. And finally, my quarterly report on the East Bay Bridge Shopping Center. Due to the economic situation, generally, there's currently very little movement by Catellus on any upgrades either to the landscaping or to the center itself. We expect those efforts to restart when the economy improves. However, the city is continuing to talk to Safeway concerning renovations and upgrades to the Pack and Save store. So that concludes my report, and I'd be happy to respond to any questions you may have.
I'd like to announce that I wish to waive all salaries for myself personally in terms of compensation.
Thank you. We have that on record.
And
Commissioner Hoff.
my next question is, I want to get a sense of the board as to whether they feel a representative should be at the next council meeting to discuss the mini-mart. How does the commissioners feel about that?
I think the chair should attend the meeting
I
and
would
present for
support
the
that, yes.
commission.
I'll be happy to attend it as long as I have your acknowledgement that that's what I'm doing.
Do you now want compensation back?
No. I'll stay with the no compensation and go to the council meeting.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. But I wanted to do it with your approval.
Yep.
So the next item on the agenda is the study session of the Ambassador Housing Project, which is, as you know, is at Adeline and 36th. And look who's back. Welcome home.
Thank you. I was just away 1 month. Good evening, Chair Hoff and members of the Commission. The Ambassador Housing Project has been in front of the Commission a couple of times in the last 6 years. The last time it came for approval was in 2004. And during the time since the approval, the city had been negotiating with the Clear Channel to looking at the possibility of removing the billboard that exists on the site. During this time, the permits expired, and so we have a new project. However, the developer, RCD, which is Resources for Community Development, and the architects, Kawamasi, they are the same as they were. They are the same players that were there before. So this is the project site. It consists of 5 parcels created in an odd shape. You have the former Ambassador site, which was right here, which was demolished about 3 years ago. You have 2 parcels along Adeline Street. There used to be a single family, which was also demolished. And then you have a parcel at the corner of Adeline and 36th Street. As you can see, that the site is divided between Emeryville and Oakland. The majority is in Emeryville, and in this case, as in the previous reincarnations of this project, Oakland has relinquished its permitting authority, and we would be sharing our draft conditions of approval with them, as well as our building permit plans before issuing them. So that's the same arrangement now as we had before. This is going to be an affordable project, as in the earlier cases. This time it's 75 affordable rental units. These are more or less equally divided between 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. So the way the site has been designed is that the 3 parcels along, which stand by themselves, 2 on Adeline, and this one along the corner, these will have townhouse type units. They'll be 3 bedroom. So there'll be 5 of these right here. The major site that was occupied by the former Ambassador building will be occupied by parking. Most of the site is going to be occupied by parking. They're also going to have lifts, so the entire parking will be accommodated at this level. The garage entries will be from 36th Street. The lobby to the project will be on Peralta, and it's right here. Along Peralta, these units, which are in blue, the applicant is looking for an option to make it live work, or flex space, or residential units. Right behind it, you have mechanical areas and equipment, and you also have bike parking at this corner right here. There's a small management office, as this is going to be a rental project. So it's a podium kind of a building. You have a U-shaped court around which you have the units surrounding it. Most of the units facing the court tend to be the larger ones, 3 bedrooms and some 2 bedrooms. There's also a community room here and an open space area right here as well. So it goes up to 4 levels. All 3 mix of units occur at all the levels. This is sort of the sections. The top one is the north-south section. You can see this. This is the freeway. And you can sort of tell the height of the freeway in terms of the height of the building. The highest point will be reaching at 55 feet. The one facing towards the north, towards the neighboring houses, is going to drop down to a little over 25 feet. This is the east-west section. You can sort of see the court and the surrounding units. I'm going to quickly go through the elevations here. I'm going to let the applicant describe in detail. They have, since the submission, since the plans, done a little bit additional work in terms of materials and designs and materials and colors as well as the massing. This is the Adeline Street elevation. Just a quick note, I noted this in the staff report as well. The doors, these doors are a little inaccurate. Actually, you have garage doors here, and there's no door here. This is the landscape plan. They're going to be adding additional trees along 36th Street and creating a kind of an entry plaza with greenery here. There's a magnolia section. The street magnolia is going to be vacated, which will allow for this entry plaza. They also have a play area for children at this area, and also some garden planters so that the residents can do some gardening when they'll stay here. In terms of conformity to zoning regulations, it is in the CG, or the General Commercial District, which has no prescribed density. The proposed density is 96 units per acre. To put this in perspective, the Adeline Place, which is recently constructed, is at 120 units, and Andante is 63 units. Most of the city, which is under MU and IL district, the density there is 75 units per acre. The building height, the minimum, the maximum is 40 feet, which can be increased to 55 feet with a use permit, and the highest portion of the proposed building is 55 feet. In terms of parking, both the resident parking as well guest parkings, they do meet the requirements, the city requirements. What this project is going to need is a parking variance, and this was also in the earlier incarnations of this project. The reason for the variance are these garages along Adeline as well as along 36th here. They back out into the street, and the zoning ordinance does not permit it for projects which have more than 4 units, mainly because of potential hazards moving into the oncoming traffic on the street. Kimley Horn is preparing an updated traffic study for this project. They had done that in the earlier case, but they're updating it because there's a little slightly difference in the unit count. And they will also be looking at the potential hazard that these garages may find. We are hoping that this project will come to you before the new general plan is in effect. However, the project does comply with the density, height, and floor area that is proposed in the draft general plan. I'd mentioned that this is an affordable project, and the affordability levels would be the rents which would show up are between 670 to 830 for 1 bedrooms, and going up to 1100 for 2 bedrooms and 1160 for 3 bedrooms. This was reviewed internally by staff, and the main comments is that we made were that the landscape area, the entry plaza, that be designed as a community garden similar to the one existing across the street. This was also something that came up in the community meeting as well. There was also a suggestion to include bulb outs on Peralta as well as West MacArthur to slow down the traffic. The other recommendation is that the townhouses, particularly along Adeline Street, have 1-car garage instead of 2 cars to minimize the driveway width, and perhaps the additional the shortfall can be accommodated in the garage itself, in the main garage. The RCD held a community meeting last month on the 17th. About 10 people attended, including Councilmember Davis. And there were a lot of clarifications that were required, that the members asked. And in terms of suggestions, they were into making sure that there was some vertical landscaping, and they also felt there was a need to have shadow studies so that they could see the impacts of shadows on their properties. So that concludes my presentation. Our recommendation is that you provide comments to us as well as the applicant on this project. So if you have any questions from me, I will hand it over to...
Did you mention the income level required for this project?
I'm sorry?
The income levels. Could you repeat that?
So it's supposed to serve the households between 30% to 50% of the average medium income, which in this area translates to between $26,800 to $44,000. And since this is a rental project, the applicant has proposed a a wide variety of mix, and so the rents, which will translate itself, are in front of your screen. So it's 670 to 830 for one bedrooms.
I think you may have a typo on page 4. You mentioned that the income level would be
Speak up, you can't hear.
110% down to
Yes,
40%.
that's a typo. Yes, that needs to be deleted from the
So it
staff
is
report.
That is the lower limit.
Yes.
Okay. Do any other commissioners have questions?
Yeah, I have a question on the undergrounding of the utilities on 36th. Is that something that will be part of this project?
Correct. As shown on the plans, that is what is being proposed right now. We have to discuss it with Public Works in terms of what, if any, additional undergrounding that we may or may not require. And this will come to you when it comes for approval.
We also need to note that 36th Street is in Oakland.
Right.
So our Public Works staff and the Oakland Public Works staff, as well as our planning staff, are coordinating to make sure we're all on the same page on a lot of this stuff, not just the undergrounding of the utilities, but vacating a portion of Magnolia Street and expanding the sidewalk area on Peralta and the bulb out at Adeline and 36. That's all in Oakland. So we're going to be working with them to make sure we can do all these things.
And is there any kind of conflict with the undergrounding and the utilities and the tree wells?
Well, that's something that we are going to be working on. That's always an issue, and at this stage of the process, it's often difficult to know what is underground.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we have experienced this issue in the past, and we are trying to get as much information before a project is approved.
Thank you.
So is the billboard issue completely resolved?
Yes, the billboard is existing, and the agreement is that it will once the city asks them to remove it. I think they have 30 days to remove it. So right now it's there since we are earning rents.
Okay. And the bulb out and community garden in the frontage on Peralta, was that suggested by staff, or is that just as a result of community input?
It was both result of the community input as well as staff felt that was a good idea.
And the bulb out would work on Peralta?
Something we would need to look into that. Yeah.
Well, there's the bulb outs would be at the north and south end of the block on
Right.
the east side of Peralta between 36th and West MacArthur, one at each intersection. It would be encroaching into the area that would otherwise be parking. But the real issue is for turning from 36th onto Peralta Street to make sure there's enough
Right.
radius, especially for big trucks that
Right.
make that turn.
Which is a
And
major
Kimley
street.
Horn is studying that.
Okay.
Was there a loading zone? Did I miss that part?
No, we. Did
I
you
seem
know?
to recall when the commission approved this project previously, the
There was
previous
no-
iteration, that there was a condition that there be a loading zone on Adeline Street. Or am I thinking of a different project?
I think
I
we're
think you're
talking
thinking of a
about,
different. You're talking about 3900 Adeline.
Right.
Oh, that's right.
Right.
That's
Um,
right.
Okay. And maybe I can ask across this way. Is there a bus that runs down Adeline? Do we have AC Transit on Adeline? Anybody know?
I don't think on that,
No bus routes down
not
No.
on that segment of Adeline.
there? Okay.
I think so.
The bulb outs you talked about are the ones on 36th Street?
Beyond Peralta, but
Corral.
past 36.
Maybe I will ask staff.
It'll be. Well, there is a bulb. The staff report also talks about a bulb out here. This is more to make sure that the cars which are backing out here have protection, so that cars turning this way do not come right on the northern portion
And where
of
was the
36th
bulb
Street.
outs on Peralta?
Peralta, it would be here. I mean, it's not shown
They're just
here,
recommended.
but
Oh, I
it's
see.
recommended
And also at the north end
at
of the
the
block.
north end here.
Part of
Right.
the
This in
community
itself
garden.
isn't the bulb out?
I'm sorry.
No,
Additional.
it'd be
It's
additional.
part of that community garden that's being created there.
Right.
If you look at drawing C4, the striping and overhead electrical plan,
Mm-hmm.
36th Street to the east of Adeline shows a right-hand turn lane. C4?
C4.
And in the lower right-hand corner of the drawing, there's 36th, the intersection of 36th and Adeline, shows a right-hand turn lane that doesn't exist there today. Is that something that's part of all the changes?
There wouldn't be a right-hand turn lane here. That's, no?
I believe that was part of the Kimley Horn recommendation for the previous project. That, in conjunction with the bulb out, is intended to minimize conflicts between cars backing out onto 36th Street. So the idea would be the right-hand lane would be right turn only onto Adeline, and if you want to go straight across 36th Street, you have to get in the left-hand lane, which puts you farther away from those cars backing out of those driveways. That was the idea.
Any other commissioner comments?
Was there
Questions? No.
in the staff conversations about design, was there any talk of garbage or additional comments from Public Works about the amount of garbage space or where garbage would go or anything like that? Or we just asked the applicant here now?
Right. Well, they weren't raised at our internal meeting.
Okay. That's it.
Any other questions of the staff? Does the developer wish to make a presentation?
Yes, they do.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Lisa Motoyama. I'm the Housing Development Director at Resources for Community Development. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about RCD and also introduce you to our architect, which you probably know well. Resources for Community Development is a 25-year-old nonprofit affordable housing developer. We are based in Berkeley. We work in Alameda, Contra Costa, and Solano County, and currently we have close to 1,600 units in our portfolio. We are really excited to propose our development, this current iteration, at the site of the Ambassador Laundry. We are really looking forward to the chance to redevelop a real infilled site and to create a very family-friendly development there. RCD has a development staff, as you can tell, but we also have an asset management staff which ensures the long-term viability financially and sort of physically of our buildings. And we also have a resident services program which brings services to all of our development sites where we connect with local resources and also bring in programs like after-school programs, computer programs, whatever the residents feel that they need to maintain their housing and to build community. And sort of with that brief introduction, I'd like to turn it over to Kava Masi.
Before Kava gets going, can I ask one more question? ahead, yeah.
I noticed in the report there was reference to special needs housing. Could you
Yes.
talk about that a little bit?
RCD is well known for its capacity to do special needs housing. We do housing for people living with HIV/AIDS. We are also one of the providers, most broad providers of housing for people under the MHSA program, which is Prop 63, which serves people with mental illness, frail elderly, survivors of domestic violence. And here at the Ambassador site, we're proposing 5 units for people living with HIV/AIDS.
I see Amy Highstand here tonight. Was this brought to the Housing Advisory Committee, this rendition? Buzz or anybody, maybe I missed the meeting?
We didn't see architectural plans, as I recall.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Amy Heastan. I'm in the Economic Development and Housing Department. This project did come to the Housing Committee. It would have been back in early 2009. And we would not have brought architectural plans. The Housing Committee doesn't really look at development plans, but they were looking at the kind of overall program proposal and moving this forward with bringing it to the agency and doing an exclusive negotiating rights agreement. So that just got approved by our agency in June, mid-June.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, if I could just make one correction. Our proposal is for housing for people from 30% of AMI to 60% of AMI. I think the staff report might have mentioned 50% of AMI as the top income level.
Will this be financed with low-income housing tax credits?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. Kava Massey of Kava Massey Architects. The third time hopefully is going to be the charm. This is the third time we've redesigned this project and this development. We're calling it Ambassador Workforce Housing. The first go around we had the old building that we built around. The second time it was for sale, and this time it's rental. I really wanted you to sort of see this glorious mayhem of an urban sort of site. It's an amazing spot. It's kind of hard to, I've been going at it from a certain direction, and I had missed so much when I looked at this aerial of all that goes on around there. From the MacArthur being sunken and so close, to all of what goes on the other side of the freeway that goes right by the site. But there's a pretty amazing community out there. A lot of artisans and artists that live in this neighborhood, and I'll talk a little bit about that shortly. This is just a really technical looking survey of the site, and it shows you all the parts that Meru mentioned. Jay, actually I'd like to maybe introduce the luminaries in the audience. There's Jeff Miller, our landscape architect, with Kyla from his office. Lieben, who's the project architect. I'm going to get in trouble for forgetting her name. Jay Connor from my office, and you met Lisa. Jay kind of put his hands in his life in his hands and took this picture as he was driving by the side on the freeway. But we're about 35 feet up in the air at that level, so we're up around the third floor of the building as we drive by. This is the corner of Adeline and 36th, and as it was mentioned, 2 bungalows are surviving on that end of the block. And then obviously the freeway is a pretty sort of constant presence on a lot of different levels. This gorgeous community garden has sprung up. We actually had some pictures of the first project that we did, and it was barely there. It was so much lower, and it's like it's come to life, and it's a beautiful asset to this project. And some nice sort of touches in that area and across the street, and we want to tap into this if we can as we go forward with the project. The billboard that won't be there, and all of the utilities that hopefully will go away.
So is it likely that that big set of transformers or whatever they are is going to?
Yeah, yeah, I would imagine they go away, because these are the light poles that Commissioner Sherman was talking about on 36th. They run along there. You heard these kinds of the statistics on the project. 75 units with about 33% for 3 2s and 1s, and some community spaces meet all the requirements and so on. We've looked at the green building, a sort of build it green system of getting a green sort of accreditation, or it's called license, or what is it called? What do we get? Rating. So we need 50 points, and we came up with 108. So we should be in pretty good shape, and we'll be really, really conscious of that and work hard to make this a green project. One of the biggest differences between this and the previous projects or proposals is that this area here, in the 2 other iterations, were totally covered by buildings. There was pretty much no open space at all on that side. And now it's around a 5,000 square foot garden there, right? And the idea is to allow the entire community of this new development to be able to use it. And so that was one big thing. Parking, as was mentioned, is met, the requirement, and we've added a few uses in the frontage. And this, I think, is a really nice idea too, that was brought up, and it has seemed to kind of stuck. It's going to be a nice little plaza in front of the front door of the place, and people now come down 36 and kind of whip around this end, and they're going to have to go a little farther out, and that should help calm things a little bit. Again, Jeff is here if you want more detail, and he could come up and talk to you about it. But the idea is to basically give a fairly dense green sort of a set of, I mean, what I'd really like to see here, and I haven't really talked to Jeff about this, is what happened on north of Old Chiron on Hollis with the poplars that are so close to each other that they create a pretty tall green wall between the building, or in this case it would be the building and the freeway. The idea is to use a lot of the brick from the old, the original building that got torn down. They're being stored somewhere. Charlie's got them in the back of, in his yard or somewhere.
I think Amy has them.
Amy has them? All right. But the idea is to use them for pavers, both in the plaza area and in some other areas. You can see some of these striping, these sort of taupe colors are that. This courtyard is about average 40 feet wide by 120 feet long, and so it's a very generous size courtyard. And when we get to the sections, I'll point to a rule of thumb that this meets, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Lift the mic up and talk into it.
Oh, sure. So the second floor, we've tried to put as many of the three bedroom units on this level as we could, and I think Jay was telling me that it's possible to actually put one more on there, but that's a good thing because it'll have direct access out into a garden area for people that might have kids. There's also a set of stairs back here that would lead you from that courtyard down into the garden area behind these two units, and we've also got a path that will lead you on the side and behind these two bungalows to here, so that these guys in these three units can get there without having to go out on the street. So everyone internally can get to that garden, which we feel is a nice amenity for the whole thing.
Is the laundry room in that common space at the back?
Yeah, we think that it's either going to be in this one or in this one, but it's off of the courtyard, so that people can easily go in and out of it. And if there are any activities in these common areas, it could spill out into the open space on the courtyard.
But that would be, one of those would include the laundry space?
Yes. As we go up the building, what you see here is that the building disappears on that end, and one of the ideas is to lower it on that end so that it becomes a better sort of neighbor to the houses next to it. And as I said, because there's no building here, this house will really benefit from it.
How tall is the building at that corner?
When it comes down, it's actually around 30 feet.
And how tall is the neighbor's building?
About probably 18, 20.
So it's twice as big.
Third.
And that's the top floor. And this section is the rule of thumb I was going to talk about, is that they say that if this vertical height is about equal this distance, you have a very useful, light, good sort of open space. And that's exactly what we have. this is 40, and that's again an average of 35 and 45. So it should work well. And this section actually is cut north-south, so you see the edge of the freeway. 36 is here, the building, and then you see how it steps down to sort of come down to a more compatible scale to the neighbor. Just sections through those two sort of fingers that come out to Adeline from the main portion, and these elevations are slightly different from what you were looking at. We've kind of fixed them, but the idea was to, on this side, for these buildings to be sort of bookends to the bungalows and very much compatible with it, the roof shape and sort of a lot more of a residential feel and look to it. These dashed lines are actually the top of the freeway, so you can see how all that's going to show up from the freeway side is the very top of this building and these couple of top floors. And the idea for this side of the building was to have more horizontal composition to the building, and because it's facing south, there's quite a few sunscreens that actually are over the windows all the way on all floors. There's a slight undulation to each floor also on those two top floors. So that from the freeway it'll have a bit of a movement to it, and at night it should actually look pretty nice, if not all the time. The west elevation is where the front door into the building is, which is here, and then a series of sort of lobbies that go all the way up the building for each floor. The idea here is to try to use some of the artists and the artisans in the neighborhood to help us design the gate, maybe as far up the building as we can go. There are two parts to this. One is just things we're going to need for the building, like some sort of a grill work on the south side that are part of the building that just have to be built and designed. That's one thing we can work with them. But we also are going to be required by code to provide a percentage of the construction cost for art. And that's another piece of it that we could actually add on to it. This side is a lot more sort of playful and has the 3 units, as I said, out here. I have some other images to show you. So this is a building in Berkeley that has the corrugated siding that is, from a little bit of a distance, looks a lot like shiplap siding, which is sort of compatible with a lot of housing. This building in San Francisco, it's been winning every award on the planet these days, is this material that's actually impregnated wood so that it doesn't age and get bleached and sort of look tired looking after a while. So that's one of the material that we're proposing to use. And then this is Corten steel, which is something that, you know, I've struggled with a little bit. We did a project down the street on Adeline that we used it, and it's sort of in a new sort of way to use it. It could be interesting, but it also could sort of reinforce the rustiness of the whole scene. So, you know, it's like we're oscillating between using this material or this, and that's to add some warmth to it, and that's where we are at the moment. So one of the views onto the site, and then the exact same view with the buildings. And this is the 3-unit with the 2-unit back here and the bigger building in the background. And we have one thing that you haven't seen, which is this drawing that shows a little bit more atmosphere. And then we also took this view to show you a couple of views of the building. And this was the study that we had drawn to just look at the massing of it and then a more sort of defined. So the core 10 or that impregnated wood be around these bays. So there would be one material, and we're looking at maybe stucco as being that material, and these bays would have that other material on them.
On the inside wall or the outer wall of the bay?
Actually, we'd like to do both. The renderer that did this basically emailed this to us at like 5:25 this afternoon. So we got it and we were like, oh my God, he didn't put the color on the bays. But that's the idea, yeah.
And is that a balcony on the fourth level? Yeah, that
This
large
one?
below. I see a door. it
You
looks
know,
like.
I'm not sure if balconies are a good idea in this spot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm just trying
no,
to figure
that's
out
not.
what you're showing there.
That wasn't the idea. You know, we've pulled that end of these bays out a little bit just to give the front door into the building a little protection from here, because it'll most likely help with the noise and so on. But you know, this plaza ought to be something really nice. And I think, do we have more? No, that's it. So that's in essence a little bit of a progress from what you had seen earlier.
Kava, is the idea that the elevator landings, that whole area is perforated, or like you can see outside?
You know, one of the things I'm going to rely on is this noise study that we're going to do by an acoustic engineer. Vicky, who lives in this house, does that look anything like your house, Vicky? No. No, okay. It says that when Ambassador was taken down, the noise is just really noticeable from the freeway. So and we did a school project in Lafayette, which is right next to the freeway, the Bentley School, and any opening into this wall that we created by putting the buildings lets all of that sound right in. So I'm not sure if it had a lot of holes in it, it would do any good for the courtyard, because that courtyard is going to be well protected from all of this.
But you could have glass, inoperable
Exactly,
glass.
right. No, I mean that's definitely that's what's shown here, and that is definitely one way to do it. The idea is that the roofs are going to be covered with both solar and solar and electric, because we're trying to. We've done this on a bunch of other of our affordable housing projects, and it seems to work really well, and is part of the only reason I looked back was I wasn't sure if it was still in the budget. And Lieben says it is, so we're okay. That pretty much concludes. I just wanted to say one other thing in that I'm not sure if it was brought up, but we took a tour of we spent quite a bit of time at one of RCD's projects on a Emery go-round bus where Nora Davis came and a bunch of the neighbors and the developer and us, and we looked at a bunch of different things, and that was a really useful, fun Saturday morning we spent.
Do any of the commissioners have questions?
Yeah. Can you talk about the sunscreens on the southern exposure?
Sure. How do you go back with this baby?
Go down the lower left corner. The arrow.
Oh, that's good. Just that? Are you interested to know what they're made out of?
Yeah, what kind of material?
Well, I'm thinking that it should be something that is more or less gridded so that stuff can sit on it. Because outside of just the noise coming from the freeway, there's quite a bit of stuff that sort of comes out, and if it was just a ledge that caught everything and we weren't totally sort of aware of detailing it properly, it could wash on the face of the building, and in no time, one rain, and it'll. So the idea is to have it keep the light from going into the units, but not hold the soot. Yeah.
And
It also should. I'm sorry, but it should also cast a more interesting shadow on the face of the building than something solid. You know, by seeing some sort of
so that'll
pattern.
be horizontal and offset from the building.
It definitely would be horizontal, and it probably could only come out by, and we actually did a quick shadow study in the office, and 1.5 or 2 will be sufficient.
And is there air conditioning in these units?
No.
Is there any kind of ventilation?
Yes.
in-
Yes,
in-
ventilation which will be filtered,
Okay.
and it's not only something that we want to do, but I think by code we're going to be required to make sure that it's filtered. Yes. So there's going to be change of air, and there's a prevailing wind that is going to come from the west, and so, you know, given the climate around here, it should work.
So it's a constant supply of outside air.
Sure.
That's filtered.
Yeah.
And sound attenuated.
Right.
So we're not bringing
Exactly.
noise. Okay.
Right.
And where's the intake for that?
It'll probably have to show up somewhere on the face of the building, because the ones that are facing the court are going to have something, but they could be anywhere from a sort of a circle that is where the duct goes, that's somewhere in the 4 to 6 inch diameter size, to a sort of a longer one. So there are some options that we haven't quite sort of picked.
So it's probably on Peralta.
Is it
Actually, where
52
each unit is going to have one.
So it's not it's not centralized.
It's not. No, it will not be centralized. No, there is no way that. I
This
mean,
building could be.
well, yeah. I mean, no housing project or no housing development, whether it's market rate, affordable, it's just not in the cards to have a central system, for a lot of different reasons. They're much more sophisticated than they need to be, and therefore expensive, and it's hard to individually control them for each unit.
I believe they did it at Avenue 64, which is also right on the freeway frontage there. We did a tour of Avenue 64, and I think they used that system there
Mm-hmm.
to control the
Centralized system?
air quality.
No, there wasn't.
Avenue 64?
It's
They had
individual, I
fans
think.
in the ceiling, that was about the
No,
extent.
no, they had a filtered system.
Did they?
Yeah.
But was it
Really?
central?
So that they, I believe it was. It wasn't to the unit. At least that's how it was explained to me. So it might be something worth checking.
The developer of that used to be with that firm is a client of ours. I'll make sure that I know exactly what they did. Did it work in your opinion? I mean, it seemed to work.
I didn't want to open the door facing the freeway, and
Well,
there
I
wasn't.
did, and it was horrible.
Right. But, I mean, in the unit itself, there didn't seem to be any particulate, but it certainly was a challenge out on the balcony. So I think it's worth looking into.
Can you tell us about the parking lifts? Are those the type that rotate like a cassette that you can get your car out wherever it's at, or is it a stacked kind of thing? Where
We haven't. Do you guys know exactly what we're doing? Because we looked at at Oxford Court, which is the project that our city just finished on Oxford and Center in Berkeley. They used the puzzle, and it seemed to be running into some issues, and so I think the stacking is the one. Say it.
I'm Jay with We're going to do the stacked lifts with pits beneath them. So each car will be individually accessible.
Okay,
So it won't be like a tandem situation.
sounds like a good solution.
So it goes up and down, but a
Right.
6-car space only holds 4 cars. Is that right? Correct. But you can get your car wherever it is. But if you imagine that there's 3 stacks, 6 spaces, but there's only you can only get to 4
The
at a time.
Adeline Place project, which recently got its TCO, has a similar system, which anyone who was at the open house might have gotten a demonstration of. And that's similar, except that the ones at the garage level move side to side also. So that in one module they had that was 3 high and 8 across, you could fit 23 cars, because you just have to have one empty that can move around, and that
Right.
seemed to work fine.
That's what's at Oxford. Yeah.
There's
This
a-
is the same system they have at Oxford.
There's a
And that's the
mechanical
one that
system
seems
for
to be-
any space, but
Get you more parking.
Right, right.
so how tall is the podium then? Is it?
The podium itself is at 15 feet high. And it's actually a good thing because it lifts the building up above the freeway some. Because standing on the 3rd floor of the building, you're going to actually see over it. And there's probably going to be spectacular views when you finally get up above it. And hopefully this green sort of screen that I'm hoping Jeff is going to give us is going to sort of filter whatever view you might not want to see.
Well, then, would the live-work lofts, or rather, the live-work units be lofted, the 15 feet, or would they be too
Actually,
level?
15 isn't quite enough for a full floor. So it most likely just going to be a very sort of generous high ceiling
Sure.
in those 3.
A tall ceiling units.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit more about the access to the courtyard? Because you were saying that the units were going to have direct access, but we've got these stormwater planters that look like they're all the way around the courtyard.
Well, you know, the elevator and the lobby runs along here with a set of stairs that will bring you from the ground floor up to it. So, you know, these were in essence put in to provide a little bit of privacy and a little distance to the windows of people's units on that level. I'm pretty sure. Is there something you want to explain, Jeff? Jeff, that would be great.
I don't think that, I'm Jeff Miller. There is no access out of the units directly into the courtyard, so you come through the hall and then in either direction out into the court. None of the courtyard units have any private patio space, or, you know, in other podiums that we've worked on, there's sometimes that's called for, but in this project, that's not part of the plan. So the planters that you're seeing are really, a lot of it is in response to stormwater management issues. A lot of them are, the ones in blue are infiltration planters. If you're looking at L 1.0. Yeah, the ones that are marked number or letter L in the courtyard. Those are all representative of infiltration planters. Actually, I'd like to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about that, because we did have a meeting with the city staff over issues of stormwater management on the project, and we have what we think is really a very exciting opportunity here, actually, to channel a lot of this stormwater to the front of the building, incorporating it possibly into the facade of the building when it does rain, in a kind of rain fountain, in a sense, and then into this front landscape that goes along Peralta Street. So we would be handling a lot of the stormwater issues in that space north of the entry plaza. But we think that's really an exciting opportunity and a way to incorporate some sort of artful treatment of this stormwater issue for the project.
Generally speaking, those infiltration planters are going to be, what, 42 inches high?
Right. They'll be the standard 42-inch high. If we can get all of the stormwater out onto Peralta Street and use none of those planters for infiltration, which is what we're hoping to try to do, actually, it does extend the area of infiltration along Peralta. But it would give us a lot more opportunity to plant in those planters a lot of different types of plants that we can't really do if they have to be infiltration species.
The retention area, would that be standing water, or would it somehow be circulated, so we don't have to worry about any vector control
Right,
issues?
no, it won't be standing water. No, it will be, in effect, an infiltration planter itself. So it will have medium in it that will filter the water, and then it'll be basically cleaned before it's returned to the sewer.
So it'll just consist of appropriate plantings
Exactly.
for that kind of a swale rain garden treatment.
Yeah, yeah. The entry plaza, we think, is a really interesting feature. I certainly remember the old building that was on the site. I think I purchased a spa there years ago. If that was the right building, wasn't it? They sold spas in that warehouse, I think. Anyway, the plaza, in relation to the community garden across the street, I just might say that I spent 12 years as the board president of a community gardening organization in San Francisco, and really have a great feeling for this as a community facility, and that's kind of one of the reasons why we've incorporated this garden area in the back as a useful working garden. But we do want to have reference. There's a lot of vertical elements, artful elements that are happening inside that community garden, and we want to do something vertical in the plaza area that kind of ties this all across visually. So we're thinking of vertical trees. We're there, and vertical trees as well along 36th Street. The trees that we're thinking about are, maybe this is more information than you want, but
Not us.
Huh?
Not us. We like lots of
good.
information.
The ones along 36th Street, we're thinking of using Zelkova. They're a columnar variety of Zelkova, and they're fairly fast growing. So we think those will get up and do what Kava was talking about.
How tall do they get?
They'll get to be 40 or 50, 55, 60 feet tall, actually. Those trees will get to be large, but they are not wide-spreading. So they're fairly vertical in form. Along Peralta and Adeline, we are proposing to use the platanus that we see in other places adjacent in the neighborhood. Further on down the street or up the street into Emeryville.
Sycamores, is that what that is?
Yeah. The entry plaza, we want to do something vertical. We're showing palms. We're open to discussion about that. Everybody always wants to talk about palm trees, usually in a passively, aggressively negative way. But
there was some mention earlier about possibly extending the community garden into that plaza area. What, have you been thinking about that, or is that a possibility?
I don't really see that as a useful idea because a community garden does need a fence, it does need enclosure, it does need protection, and fencing off that area doesn't seem useful in terms of the community. I think by being effectively using native plants and appropriate plants in the main area of the extension all the way from 36 north, I think would make a really nice tie to the community garden, and but I don't see it as a really great community gardening space, actually.
So what are your thoughts about screening the east side? Because the renderings we got in our packet showed a nice row of trees behind the little bungalows and in front of the 5-story building there, and it doesn't appear that there's room to do that.
Screening the east side of the main building is what you're saying.
Actually, I'm the one who drew that because I wanted to make Jeff put something up right here.
Uh-huh. Well,
Too little?
well, it's a 5-foot passage.
Yeah.
So I think the ADA issues will, kind of rule in terms of what we can get by there. But we could possibly plant trees with tree grates, making them accessible. Trees do tend to get big, and we'd have to select the right tree so it doesn't wipe out the space, as a passage, I'd say.
Any other comments?
You know, I'm
or
sorry, but
questions?
one of my plans was to go talk to the owners of those two bungalows and see if we can grow some trees up against the fences, but on their side.
On their property line.
Have you met with I mean, have they weighed in on this proposal, the two bungalow owners?
I believe it says yes.
Looks like we have one of them here.
One of them came on the tour with us 2 weekends ago, and the other one has given us a call, but they didn't come on the tour.
We'll have a chance to hear from the public in a moment.
So-
Are you done?
No, I actually have some
There's
questions.
more questions, yeah.
So, can you describe the access to the common area on the ground floor off of Adeline? It looks like there's no gate system. How are you going to control people going into that private space there off of 36 and Adeline Street? Is the idea to have that gated?
Yeah, that would be gated.
Okay.
On the 36th Street side, I think you can see the gate there. The northern walk of the into the garden area, you can see a gate there, and I think the gate that's shown doesn't have the swing shown on it on the southern unit there, but that would be gated. The access into the garden from the podium, I mean, you understand that you come through and then down a set of steps and into that area.
And then
that
to
way.
the east of the individual planting plots, there's a series of tick marks. Is that for bicycles, or what is that?
No, that
there?
would be an overhead arbor.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is
Probably
that
carrying a
area
vine.
5,000 square feet, or that garden area and the children's play area combined 5,000 square feet?
I think it's the whole area combined, yeah.
And I assume there'd be an encroachment permit. There's quite a bit of building space that extends over the entry plaza, so that would require an encroachment permit for the city for that?
Well, it's only in that very corner, right here, where that would be required. But because City of Oakland is sort of vacating that and turning it over to Emeryville, we're going to work out with them and try to get that, yes.
Well, actually, what we're proposing is that
Oh, yeah.
Oakland vacate its portion of Magnolia Street, north of 36th Street. We vacate our portion of Magnolia, north of 36th Street, and then it all gets sold or somehow transferred to RCD and becomes part of the property.
Oh,
So that wouldn't be overhanging the public right-of-way. It would be overhanging their
Okay.
property, that the plaza would be on their property,
good.
except for the sidewalk, of course.
And then they'd be responsible for maintaining it.
Absolutely.
The other thing is, of course, all the street trees would have structural soil under them, and we'd be following all the Emeryville standards. That we worked with Kava on the Age Song project and went through the whole process of the street trees there, so we're quite aware of what the standards are.
And can you talk about your rain wall a
Yeah.
little bit more?
Yeah, well, what I mean, you can see it in the plan as D there in the front, and I think what our thought is that we have a lot of water falling on the courtyard and on the roofs of the building, and oftentimes that's just channeled directly into the sewer system. But with all the stormwater management requirements, we need to filter that, and we need to do something with it. So we feel that the first step is having people understand that it's there. Part of what's happening with a lot of this water is it just gets disappeared. Either it used to get disappeared into the sewer, or now it's getting disappeared into some sort of filter system somewhere. So we want to expose that water when it comes on the surface near the entry of the building as a feature. You may be aware of the project down the street here at 1500 Park with the big waterfall.
I live there. I have questions about a rain wall.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, interesting. Well, I designed that garden, so maybe we should talk
Okay.
now or later. But, yeah, I'd be interested in your
What is the concept, that the water would flow down the face of the building?
Right, there'd be some sort of way to keep the water on the face of the building and then channel it into this area where it can be filtered
But
and
the
cleaned.
courtyard
And
is only one level up.
But off the roof as well.
right, but it does
comes
have the roof
down.
water as well. So we have a lot of water coming off a lot of hard surface, and it seems like an opportunity to use it rather than kind of hide it away.
I think it's a creative approach, but what were you envisioning in terms of the kind of material? Because it's not going to be, the water's not going to be dropping down in a waterfall effect throughout the year. So
Right.
how is it going to look when there isn't any water coming
Well,
down?
it's going to have to be a kind of a surface treatment, and we're not sure what it is yet, but that it would be clearly a treatment to the surface that will look good when it's dry and be brighter and more glistening when it's wet. But it will be some sort of artful treatment of that shaft where the water
Well,
will be
I know
directed.
at 1500 Park, it's a real sell for that building. However, over the years, we've had some challenges with it, and the homeowners have had to spend a lot of money
Yeah.
dealing with it, with the
Water
surface treatment pulling off,
Right.
leakage, the pumps, and granted, it's different. It's not using rainwater. It's a fountain, basically, a
Exactly.
vertical fountain. But it's a lovely when it's working, but a lot of the time it's not working.
Uh-huh.
And so, there are some concerns associated with something like that I would have if this was going to be introduced at
Yeah.
this site, particularly since it's low-income housing and there are maintenance issues involved.
Mm-hmm. I do understand the way that wall was built, although I didn't actually design the detailing of the wall. It was a shotcreted wall that I don't think was necessarily waterproofed correctly in the
It wasn't.
process. So from the get-go, there was penetration of water into the stairwell behind there. But with that as an experience, I think I know a lot more about what this could be here. And we wouldn't have all the problems of pumps, because we're not pumping any water here. We're kind of accepting all the water. And we would have different levels of water falling, because if water was channeled from the roof, we have a source there. If it's coming from the second floor, we're not going to pump it up to the roof to bring it all the way down. So it just offers a real opportunity to think about how to display this water. And I think the issues of how it's detailed and how we protect the building is clearly something that we're going to need to deal with from a kind of structural and standpoint of the building. But I appreciate you bringing that up, and I think it's something that we do need to keep in mind as we go forward.
Is the idea with that, I don't know how far you've thought through the concept, but is the idea to have like a first flush before it goes down into, because that's going to be nasty when it comes off the roof. And it's at a point of contact right at the entrance to the building. So I'm curious how you were intending to deal with the particulate that accumulates. up there.
Yeah, there probably will be a first flush, a way where the water is
Shunted off.
channeled and stored and then released. Also, because we need to release it, at a certain rate, so we would have to be able to clean it from that. Rainwater is not that dirty. I mean, this isn't coming off of a parking lot or, it does have particulate in it. The roof will have,
From the freeway.
especially at the first rain storm. But
Yeah, we did a visit to John's building, which is the Pacific Park Plaza, which is right next door to Avenue 64th. And we could look down on the roof of Avenue 64th, and it's amazing the
Oh,
delta that has formed on that roof from the particulate off the freeway. It's actually intimidating to see. So it's just something to be aware of.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's a ways to go with this concept. If it doesn't work, we'll do it another way. But we would like to explore this. And
Okay, thanks.
The west elevation,
He needs
At
to
least-
convince me first.
on what we have makes it look like the front of the 3 bedrooms or live work units or whatever have the raised planters as well. Are they the L planters as well in the front? They look tall.
That's all right. The west
In
elevation?
front of on
On the
Peralta.
Peralta? No, those are, there aren't any raised planters in
Okay.
that area, no.
Well, looks like there's stairs going up to the doors or something.
Oh, I don't.
Is the elevation incorrect? A 3.1? Because it shows planters.
I know. I think I'm gonna have to talk to Jennifer.
Because you're thinking planters.
I think it's a good thing for those windows to have a little bit of distance from
But not like
the public.
but not like Glass House.
Not like glass.
Glass House facing Hollis.
Oh, you know why those are there?
Yes.
That's why I made the comment, Jim. That was for you.
Any other comments, question? You have another question?
One more question. The solar on the roof, is that going to be architecturally incorporated somehow, or is it?
No.
Okay.
It will sit on the roof, and it'll most likely be not visible at all.
I wanted to ask you a
Something like a
question
flat
about
panel.
the Adeline Street elevation.
Yes.
The, looking back at the building, are you concerned that you've created a cul-de-sac canyon in which these 2 single-family homes are in there? Do you feel that it will seriously impact the livability or desirability of the 2 remaining houses?
No.
I mean, it's 40 feet, or it's 50 feet in the back?
What
and
it
thir-
was before with.
And 30
Yeah.
feet on each side.
I mean, those 2 houses are pretty exposed out there.
Pardon?
The houses are very, very exposed, sitting there sort of alone with the looming freeway nearby. I think in a way it's going to quiet things down for them a little bit. And again, I mean, architecturally we're doing our best to sort of integrate the ones that are right up against them on the sides and the front. And hopefully we can screen the back enough so that the taller building.
They're only 5 feet from the property line, right?
Yep.
On each side, so it's 10 feet away.
What's the distance between the corner building and the first house? Do you know?
It's around 15 feet.
50 feet?
15.
15, oh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
If there are no more questions for the developer, is there any member of the public that would like to speak on this issue? No? Okay.
Now's your chance.
We would welcome hearing from the neighbors.
Please state your name, please, and address.
Yasmin Amer, 3605 Adeline.
3605, Adeline, okay.
Hi, nice to meet you. Sorry, I'm not sure how to address everybody, so I'm going to be a little informal.
Why don't you pick up that microphone, right?
This one?
Yeah, push it up so you don't have to bend over there. There you go.
Is that better?
That's good.
Okay, thanks. So I signed the papers on my house beginning of June, and I only found out about this project because one of my neighbors came to tell me personally. No one came to, I haven't gotten any mail or anything from the city. So I'm kind of new to the project. This is my first time attending a meeting. But I think you guys did a great job with the
Where
with the
do you live
architecture.
in relationship to the project?
She's one of
the
those
little
houses.
house on the
You're one of those 2 houses?
Yeah.
there? Okay,
my bungalow is the one closest to the freeway.
okay.
And I love my house. I think it's great. It's beautiful. It's a historical landmark. All the wooden cabinetry and everything is pristine. It's as if it had never been touched. It's a historical landmark.
That's great.
It's beautiful. So I'm fixing it up. From when I bought it until today, it's a completely different house. So I have quite a bit of concerns with the architecture that's being proposed. Here, I have some stuff written down. I actually had a question for the architect about balconies being on the east elevation.
Chair Hoff, could I just interrupt for
I
a quick
don't-
second? I just want to remind all the speakers they're limited to 3 minutes.
Oh, thank you.
What did he say?
One more minute.
One more minute? Okay, I have a lot to say in a minute. Basically, I have concerns about my safety. I have concerns about the type of income level that are going to be admitted, how they're going to be screened, if at all, to these houses. I'd also like to know how long it would be for construction to take place, if there's noise pollution, if there's also safety with the construction workers there when it comes to my house, what the traffic is going to be like before, during, after, around my area, if during the construction, after the construction, if the traffic and parking is going to be affected, what garbage is going to be like during construction and afterwards, the cleanliness of it. Again, the balconies, and the architect actually said something interesting about the prevailing west wind. I won't have any wind, it seems like. I'm all for low-income housing. I think it's great. But like I said, there's some concerns. So.
I'm afraid we can't address all your questions at this meeting, but perhaps you can meet with the staff at your convenience, and I'm sure they'll be glad to go over these questions with you.
Okay, thank you.
You can also
individually.
submit them in writing, and we'll convey them to the architect. And,
Who-
and
who
you can
is-
certainly speak to the architect and developer.
Okay, who is? Right.
So we'd be happy to address any questions as well.
Okay.
Why don't you exchange contact information?
Yeah. Thank you.
And if you could also sign in,
Yeah,
there's a
just-
speaker's sheet to sign in so that we have a record.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak to this item? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Janine Frick. I live at 3604 Adeline Street, which is across the street from her. Directly, I guess it would be directly across the street. And am I using my time while he's doing
I
this?
was gonna say, pause her time.
Okay.
You're on the east side of Adeline
I can't really
Street?
tell from that picture, but oh, there's the land.
She's here.
I'm right there.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And I had to come late because I have to work too to pay my mortgage. But there's various things that I'm afraid of. There's a list, and I did go take a look at the building that they had in Berkeley. I do have the names of the studies that I found on the internet versus the dense housing and the low-income housing in a general area and the impact that they have on the community. I do have all that information. With the architecture, I know in the initial meeting they had said that there would be those two buildings and then it would graduate farther away, and they showed how the sun would fall and things like that. I did take the time to stand outside and watch the sun. And I did take the time to go through and look at 50-foot buildings and see the impact that they would have in the area. And I did spend a lot of time driving around looking at their buildings because I don't know if the email was sent for the tour or whatever, but I didn't get it. And I do have a tremendous amount of concerns for I didn't get to see the designs really because I came in, but I do have a tremendous amount of concerns. And like she was saying with the balconies, some of the things that we had discussed were things being thrown into her yard. The design as far as being so close to her, being able to look in, and her inability to have privacy. As well as me, the sunlight coming down, how it will affect the garden. And I don't want to be a bummer. I really believe that it can be a great thing. But I was thrown for a loop when there were 75 units proposed, and the height and The parking, I don't know I got 49 seconds. So I know the parking is going to be an issue. My foster daughter, she's in low income housing. She's living with her mother and her sister lives there. And in that household, there's 4 cars in that household. So is there going to be a regulation on how many cars each household has? And in the interview, are they going to check that? Because if there is no other parking, like under the overpass or anywhere else, that's going to be a severe problem for the neighbors. And I would like to submit this information. I never got any calls. I know I was told I was going to get a call. And all the investigating I kind of did on my own. So I have researched it. I do believe it could be a good project. I believe the architects did a nice job on their other thing. And I think that you guys are doing a good job here. So I don't know what else to say.
Thank you so much. Would you please sign in? Anybody else care to speak on this item? Okay, we'll bring it back to the commission. Do the commissioners have any comments?
I think
Yes.
it's the best project we've seen so far on this site. I like the architectural variety of the form, and while it's in a preliminary stage at this time, I think it's quite reasonable. And if you look at the shadow patterns that were included in the plan, I don't think it...
But did we get them?
Yes, they're in here.
Oh, that's the new thing.
I think that it doesn't really cause any serious problems.
I'll go next. I am really happy to see a creative approach to some low-income housing, but I have some serious concerns with this project. And the first one is some of the health issues. If it's family-friendly housing, it's going in right next to the freeway, and I'm really concerned about the air quality issues associated with that. We've got a garden, a play structure, all that's outdoors, of course, so the children can have sunshine. And but it's next to a freeway, so I would want to see some sort of an air quality health risk assessment study done on this. Kava mentioned, I think the Core 10 could work because, you can almost do anything to that and it still looks good. But stucco, particularly on the facing on the freeway side, on the 36th Street side, I'm sort of wondering how that's going to look after a few years and what's the maintenance to keep it clean looking. I'm really concerned about the massing. I just think it's too much on that site. And I believe that particularly for those 2 sweet little bungalows, it's just going to overwhelm them. And I would like to see something that's set back farther from those units. Privacy is an issue for anybody. And we've had to deal with that in the Triangle as we've looked at projects that come before us that are larger than what the standard typology is for that area. So I'm really concerned about the privacy issue and this just overwhelming that area. I understand staff's position about it's next to the freeway. This is a massive structure, but I would really like to see something that's a smaller footprint. I just don't think it works as it's currently proposed.
I sort of agree with Patty on the massing. I'm not sure how you do it because I like the density of and the location of the density. I know there's environmental risks there, but there's certainly a lot of that along the freeway in our town and the neighboring cities. So if there's a way to do some studies, that would be great. But I like the massing, and I don't like the massing, but I do like the amount of larger units. I don't know how you can get the box away. The elevations and the designs we have today are different than the ones that you're showing today are different than the ones we had in the plans. So I like the articulation that you show in the new plans, and I think you can keep going with that as we go along. One of the neighbors mentioned that parking would be an issue, but I was going to suggest reducing the parking. It's transit oriented, and I just think that there's too many parking spaces, and with the reduced parking we'd actually be able to articulate the building, step it down at the top, and reduce the massing in general. So I don't know where you go from here to there, but in my opinion it's very close to transit, very close to the BART, and very close to shopping, and very close to everything. It does not have to be so over parked. On the materials, I liked, what would you call it, the rusty metal. I think more of that would really help, because that artist community next door is really cool, and I love the garden across the street. So if it could intermingle with those neighborhood amenities, it would be really great. You mentioned that there's no courtyard access. I would suggest that every unit has courtyard access. Somebody said there might be some kids there. I think Kava mentioned there's going to be a lot of kids there. I would gather to say every 3 bedrooms going to have at least 1 or 2 kids, and every 2, maybe half the 2 bedrooms. So we're talking 40 children, school-age children. They'll be using that site. I've been in nonprofit housing for over 10 years. I know Buzz has built some nonprofit housing in Northern California too. These are going to be family. There's going to be a lot of families there. So courtyard access is a must. Otherwise, they're running around the building and they're not getting in and out of the courtyard, and you can't see them. Put the kitchens on the courtyard so they can watch their kids. The garbage area is way too small. I'm sure you'll get there from here, but it needs to be much larger. Chutes need to be in. It needs compactor. Otherwise, you're going to have 4 or 5 cans, and they're going to be out on the street, and then they're going to be picked up, and then these neighbors are really going to be upset. So really look, you might get waste management involved right away. They come in, they tell you what you need. They don't want to come there more than once a week either, so get waste management or a garbage consultant involved early. And then the loading, there's going to be a lot of in and out. At the affordability rate you have it now, level you have it now, once this fills up, there's not going to be a lot of moving out. It'll probably become a pretty stable building, thankfully, but initially loading's going to be a big concern. The plaza will be used a lot, both by the people who live there and the people in Dogtown. So either embrace it or make it not very comforting. I don't know where you go, but I was going to say embrace it and make seating, and I think it's going to help that neighborhood. It's going to hopefully come together around this building once it's done. And it's been a vacant site for a long time, and like Buzz said, we've looked at 3 renditions of this. I'm not an architect, but I think the townhouses are fairly boring. But the new elevations you showed today look a little better. There's a lot of articulation in the bungalows, a lot of eaves and awnings and insets. They're really cool looking. So I'm glad to hear that they're cool looking on the inside too. I think we could do a lot more with the townhouses to make them look interesting as well. And that's it.
Anybody else?
Yeah. I think you did a great job on the Peralta side. I really like the variety of things that you have there. I think it really energizes that whole area, and with the gardens across the street, it really works together really well. What I don't like is the townhouses, and again, the massing. And what I think the thing that I really dislike the most is probably the 2-car garages on the townhouses, which is, I wish we'd get away from that in Emeryville. At this point in time, I'm not sure that it's really appropriate in most places. And especially with affordable housing, to have the focus of the house be a 2-car garage, that just seems kind of incongruous to me. What I would recommend is the 2 townhouses that are kind of nestled in the U shape. I would prefer to see the building go up 1 more story, part of it, create some more interest to the roof line, and get rid of those townhouses there and make a really nice space, a garden space. I'm really bothered by the amount of parking space that's being used in that area when it could be used as park and outdoor space.
When you say the building go up, which building? The main building?
The 2-unit.
The two-unit townhouse.
Make them higher.
No, get rid of them.
Get rid of them. And raise what building?
And then the main structure, add a partial floor, another floor to a part of that.
That might be illegal.
Well, that would require a height variance, because
But
55 is the maximum with a
construction-wise,
use permit.
4-story over a garage is the maximum you can build.
With wood frame.
Yeah, it could raise building code issues too.
Is that a possibility to increase the height?
Not with wood
It's
frame
not?
construction.
Okay.
Other than setback,
Not that your point isn't well taken.
So I think the massing next to those two houses, I really don't like that. If that could be, if there's anything that could be done to get rid of those two townhouses, I'd like to see that. I don't think the garages opening up, the cars backing out onto 36th is a good idea. I'd rather see, again, I'd like to get away from the two-car garages here. This is really an urban setting. Let's put the parking in the main parking garage. I agree with Frank that this should be a transit-oriented development, and I think it is overparked. So I think those garages could go away. That could possibly lower the height of those townhouses along 36th. The other thing is the bike parking. I'd like to see less emphasis on car parking and more emphasis on bike parking. And if you were to use where the three townhouses are on 36th, if you were to use that whole bottom floor as bigger trash area, larger bike parking area, one of the things that I'd really like to see is individual bike lockers. And I think the floor space, a 50 by 25 foot area could easily accommodate 60 bike lockers like we've got in Pacific Park Plaza. And I think with being a little bit more creative, you could easily get more in there and accommodate all the required bike parking. But I think that it's really important that they be lockers, particularly in this area. I'd like to see I totally agree with what Patty said about the stucco. You know, I'm not a big fan of stucco to begin with, but and it should be, to my feeling, should be used minimally if possible. I am concerned about the dirt on it collecting on the stucco finish, especially on 36, as Patty said. And of the two materials, the wood siding or the corten steel, definitely go with the corten steel. I think that's a much classier, richer material. I think it really lends itself to the area and the industrial nature of Emeryville. So I guess my biggest things are, if there's any way to get rid of the two townhouses on Adeline, make that into a courtyard. If we could somehow lessen the amount of parking that we have, increase the density in the main structure, I'd like to see that. Reduce the height and the massing of the townhouses in general.
Do you have any comments?
My main concern with it is also the massing. It's just there's no buffer to those two little houses. It's such a rough transition between them. The building just overwhelms the other one, and the other two, and there's no room to do any kind of buffering, screening. Privacy is a concern. It's a real concern. I don't mind it being really tall on the southwest corner because it's not going to impact things there. The shadow studies seem to show that it's not going to bother the community garden across the street, but that transition right at the property lines to the other adjacent properties is it's just not working for me. And I agree with John that not necessarily that you should get rid of the townhouses. I don't think it's a bad idea to have the townhouses, but I think that a more articulated form would work better, and I don't want to see garages lining the street the way they're shown here. There's also sort of an incongruity between what's shown on the plan and what's shown on the planting, because you've got two garage doors and trees in front of them, so it's obviously not been totally worked out yet. But the garden space on the north east corner, the community garden space that's within the project, seems like it's going to, that and the children's area seems like it's going to be shaded all the time, which is a further reason to step down the building or do something that softens that edge. Those are my main concerns with the project. But, you know, I never thought I would say I wanted to see a reduction in affordable affordable housing units, because we certainly need as much affordable housing, and it sounds like you run a really good program.
I'm sure Jim may have a few comments.
Yep. So I have to echo Patty's concerns about health, and I'm curious, especially after visiting Avenue 64 and seeing what it is to live right next door to the freeway and the particulate that builds up. You go out on the terrace there and you put your hand on the railing and it's filthy. And they knew we were coming to do a visit. So I'm curious, is there going to be any additional environmental review for this staff? And if so, I'd like to see an understanding of what the risk is and how it's going to be addressed. Whether it's going to be internal units that have individual filtering system or a controlled system through the whole building. I know it's an issue. I've seen it in town. And I don't want to put a bunch of low-income people in a space that's unhealthy. And I'm sure you don't either. So I want to make sure that if we're approving this, that the issue is addressed. Either it's not really a health issue, or if it is, what's your long-term solution for addressing that problem? I have mixed feelings about the building. I appreciate the playfulness of the Peralta frontage. I don't think it's appropriate to have a community garden in that space because of the issues the landscape architect raised. I don't want to see a big fence at the entrance to the building. I'm a little concerned about deliberately creating places for people to sit and gather there, but I think you can accomplish that. I actually think trucking in some big mature palms would probably be a real stable vertical influence at that corner, and wouldn't be opposed to them, although I've heard some people object to that. But they're tough. They'd survive there, and probably would help make that building look like it's been there for a while. There are issues that have to be resolved around the stormwater runoff treatment. This idea of a wall, the idea of creating water that ponds in the front of the building. You got kids there. So those issues all have to be worked out so it's not a problem with the likely contact that's going to happen there. And I agree with Frank that, we've seen what happens with those containers in courtyard spaces. And it ends up imposing on the functionality of that space and the enjoyment of that space for the people who otherwise could use those courtyard areas. There's limited common open space for people here. You're going to have a whole bunch of kids. You're going to have parents that are struggling to find a place for those kids to go, a place that's safe, and it needs to be maximized wherever it can. I don't want to see a reduction in units. And I'm concerned about opening up getting rid of the 2 units as John suggested on Adeline, and then you've got free access and no eyes right there, which I see as problematic. But if there's a way of reorienting that structure to maximize the ground floor area so it's actually functional, I see that as an advantage. Another challenge with that, though, is you got to go down a little pathway on the north edge of the building and then downstairs to get to the ground level, and it assumes there's going to be parental supervision there, and most likely a lot of times there won't be. So there's a lot of challenges with making sure this is a well organized, functional space. Frank's point about something as simple as trash, and making sure you've got enough space to contain trash so it doesn't spew out into the access into the building and the lobby. Maybe reorganizing that part of the ground floor and bringing the bike storage closer to the exit points to the building, so you're not forced to go all the way across the garage to park your bike, and so they're more visible to the street and to where people are coming in and out rather than tucked away. There's still a lot of functional issues and design issues that I think need to be worked out. At a minimum, I want to see the townhouse unit facing Adeline dropped at least 1 floor. You can go back up to 3 floors toward the rear, toward the west edge I think it would actually screen some of the noise to the bungalows to the north of the set of townhomes. But it's a 30-foot wall there, and it's an ugly wall. And I think the best way to deal with it is to drop at least one floor there for the unit closest to Adeline. In the previous iterations, we had cars backing onto 36th, and there's really no way around getting a use on that frontage there without that challenge. But I agree with John's point about reducing the number of car spaces in those townhouse units. And there was a point by one of the neighbors around how you're going to control vehicles in the complex and who gets the space and what are they committing to, because the last thing you want are a bunch of cars that are accumulating. I don't remember what it was, Age Song or another project where we had that actually there was a commitment that tenants had in terms of number of vehicles that they were going to have in the unit. So we've seen that problem before, and it's I think there's some language out there that you can develop to at least try to address that issue. People are going to do what they're going to do, but at least if it's clear to them what their options are in terms of public transit and the limitations you're expecting them to follow, that would help address some of those concerns. The mass of the main building on the east side is a problem. It's putting those two bungalows into a fishbowl, and you're compromising the opportunity for privacy in their backyard. You got 4 levels of windows looking down into their space, and you got a cement pathway that's going to encourage people to be walking it right along the edge of their backyard. At a minimum, that pathway needs to be eliminated at the back there. I don't know whether it's required for fire access, and if it's not, I'd like to see poplars or, giant timber bamboo or something that goes vertical along there and provides some softening of the east facade and some privacy for the adjacent property owners there. And I'd like to see the applicant work with those property owners and possibly even contribute to landscaping in addition to fencing there, providing landscaping. I'm not suggesting you maintain it, but this is such a major change for the experience that those people have that I think, and you have such a limited opportunity in the 5-foot setback, that I think it's appropriate you work with them and try to expand the landscape treatment in that area. Alternatively, I think you need to give more breathing room to that 5-foot or the 5-story building mass, and I don't think you want to do that. So I'd like to see you work with those neighbors and address not just the mass, but the fenestration and what it does to their privacy. I didn't hear from staff on whether we're going to get any information on the health issue and how that's going to be addressed. Is there going to be any other environmental review on this project, looking at traffic and other issues?
Well, we're proposing to exempt it under the infill, urban infill development exemption. We are doing a traffic study, as you know, because there are traffic concerns. We could have an air quality study done as well, if you wish.
I'd like some information on what it means and how that's conducted. I don't know, but I want to make sure that the use is appropriate at this location, and if there's a problem, whether it's noise and noise attenuation or, the quality of the air the people are going to be, the kids who are living in that complex are going to be breathing. I want to know and have the information that demonstrates, that it's not a problem or this is what you do to fix it.
Yeah, I think the noise, with children out playing, they're not going to be adversely affected, I believe, from any noise from the freeway. But the air quality is a really important issue, and I haven't been supportive of locating any more housing along any of the freeways that bisect Emeryville. So I would really want to be convinced that this isn't a health problem, because you're supporting family housing, and we welcome that. And then you also mentioned there may be some residents that have particular health issues that are even more vulnerable perhaps than the children.
I think my last comments are about the skin of the building. And as Kava pointed out, there's a potential problem with the particulate accumulation and what that does after rains, light rains or heavy rains, and over time. So I'm glad to hear that you're thinking about that. You have these projections on the south facade that extend. I noticed them in the elevation extending horizontally into the Peralta frontage, and I'm not sure that really works. It almost feels like the edge of a guardrail that stuck out around the building, because it doesn't appear that you're actually wrapping it a little bit around the building. It just sticks out there. So I guess I'd like to see a little bit more clarity on what you're thinking there, and just make sure it doesn't look like you're looking at the back of something as you head south on Peralta. But I think there are a lot, as I said, I think there are a lot of challenges. This is a study session, so now it's your job to fix everything.
All right, I had two more comments. Universal design, I think, is something that council has been talking about. I think general plan too, so look into that. And then on the car lifts, somebody mentioned having problems with the puzzle lifts. Recently finished a project at Piedmont and Pleasant Valley, 36-car puzzle lift Klaus system. We had some issues within the first 6 months, but it's been going for almost 2 years now, and it's running strong. It's an infill development, and just on one side, you show 32 stack. If it was a puzzle lift broken up, you'd get upwards of 80 spaces just on that one east end, and that would seriously reduce the parking on the rest of the garage. And then you could maybe bring some of the units down on 36th Street and then get some more roof articulation, maybe get rid of one of the townhouses or reduce the parking in the the townhouses that have double spots. And if you'd like to go take a look at that system, I think it's the only one around here, but it does work fine.
Actually, is that the same as the system that's at Adeline Place?
Right, what's the name of the other one that just opened?
Adeline
It's a puzzle
Place?
lift.
What?
The one that we saw recently.
Adeline Place.
Yeah, Adeline Place has a puzzle lift.
Right.
It goes all directions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the middle, there's 3 levels.
Mhm.
There's a pit, there's an upper level, and there's a level at the driveway
Yeah.
level.
Oh,
The
okay.
pit ones go up and down, the top ones go up and down, and the ones at the driveway level go side to side.
Is the whole thing interconnected? Every single parking space?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, pretty much. You can get your car from anywhere. You have
Right.
to move
I guess
the
I
middle
haven't seen
one,
it.
and then a lower
Anyway,
one comes up.
the
or up
three
comes down.
three-tier puzzle lifts do work, and there's local people who work on it. They're quick. They're quicker than the passenger elevator. People really coming to fix it. So
Well, that would then
Okay.
get rid of the parking on the townhouses and lower them, and also create much more space for trash and bicycle storage and everything else.
Chair, I have one more comment. I saw the applicant reps going back and forth to the neighbors. It's important for me, and I think the entire commission, that you meet with your neighbors, especially the most affected neighbors, and hear their concerns and try to resolve them. So hopefully we'll hear that by the time you come back for public hearing. And I'd also like to encourage the neighbors to actually put those concerns in writing, so your position is clear, and provide copies of those concerns to city staff as well, so they come to the planning commission and everything's clearer.
Okay.
One more quick comment, if I may.
All right.
And just to reinforce what Jim was
I
saying.
get to say something eventually.
The getting rid of the path on the east edge, I would absolutely support that. I don't really think that path gets you anything. I think it would function much better if you could put bamboo there. I think that would make a world of difference, giving some privacy to the neighbors, and also add some green to that side of the building.
I guess some of my comments will be repetition of what other commissioners have said, but I'd like to address the massing of the building, which I think is extreme. I agree with the commissioners who said that. I noticed in the northwest corner of the building, obviously to accommodate the owner of that single-family house, you stepped the building down 2 stories. I think it would be important to step the entire east facade of the building down at least 2 stories so it will not overshadow the buildings on Adeline Street. I think the building is extremely massive, will create shadow problems, obstruct the nice westerly breezes that some of the tenants across the street enjoy. So I think, while I really think it's important to have affordable housing, I don't think we should do it at the effect of harming the neighborhood. There has to be a compromise between how much affordable housing we can have and having a desirable project. I think the Adeline Street, I think Jim pointed on this a little bit, I think it's just bad. It really destroys what could be a very nice residential area. I think instead of those 3-story townhouses, we should have 1 or 2-story flats or homes facing Adeline Street, which instead of being in conflict with the existing homes would complement them and create a little neighborhood along Adeline Street. I think having those 3-story, 30-foot buildings on either side of those 2 homes is not in the best interest of the neighborhood. So those are the 2 things I feel strongly about. Reducing the mass of the building by lowering the east facade of the main building and changing the flats on Adeline Street into more compatible size units that would be consistent with what's there. Are there any other comments?
I think we've
staff
exhausted
have something
the
they
whole
wanna
issue.
I'd just like to make 2 comments in response to a couple of the commissioner comments. Concerning the project that Commissioner Martin mentioned where there was reduction in parking, or where there was a condition of approval that limited the parking that the residents could have, that is true. That is an assisted living project where a number of the residents will have dementia. Some are independent, but none of them are expected to own cars. And there is a provision in their agreements that actually says they may not own any cars. And there is no parking provided for residents of that project. The only parking that's provided for that project is for employees. So that's one thing. So I'm not sure how that translates to a residential project like this, but we could see if we could work on something like that. The other thing is, I just want to remind the commission that there used to be a fairly monolithic brick building on this site. And frankly, I don't remember exactly how tall it was or exactly where it was situated with relation to the east property line. But the massing of this new building is perhaps a little bit larger than that building was. But it's not that different from what was there before the city tore it down. So
Okay,
just another point of information.
Before we move on, I would like to just reinforce something Jim Martin said. I think the architects and the staff should have a positive obligation to meet with the neighbors and get specific comments back to them and to the commission, so we know how. I don't want one of the neighbors coming in and say, "Oh, I don't know about this project." I think it's important that you contact the people on both sides of Adeline Street, get their written comments, and bring it back to the commission. I think that would be very helpful. So if there are no, thank you, Jim, for that idea. So if there's no other comments, we'll conclude this study session. And thank you very much all for coming. And we're going to have a 5-minute break at the request of the commission. Meeting, pardon?
Which is her, this is
Mira's
her item?
coming.
That's
Is
her
she-
item,
is she
okay.
the one?
She's the one, yes.
Maria's always the one.
Here she comes.
Oh, actually,
We
Arlie is the one
will-
for the last two
We will
items.
shortly be having a public hearing on the South Bay Front, this site development agreement.
And so what's the procedure, Art? How does the public hearing process happen? There's a presentation from staff, then there's a presentation from the applicant. How much time do people get to speak? All
Do I
that
have to
stuff.
do that up front?
That's what you do, yeah. Since there's so many people here for the items.
The procedure, as Mr. Martin said, is as follows. The staff will make a presentation. We will then open the public hearing, right? To the public. Each person will have, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, we'll have a public hearing, the staff, and then the applicant will get to speak. Then we'll open the public hearing to the public. The public's time is limited to 3 minutes per person to speak. We'll then close the public hearing and have comments from the commissioners. So with that, we'll
And a
turn it over.
decision.
Did I do that? all
And a
right?
decision, yep,
And a
that's
decision.
good.
We'll try to make a
Perfect.
decision.
Try to-
And there's a packet out in the link for people to look at if they're curious.
I'm glad I got so much help.
Okay, so this is a request for an extension of an existing development agreement for the South Bay Front or Site A or Bay Street development that we know. The development agreement was executed about 10 years ago in October 1999 and set to expire this October, and the request is to extend it by 5 years. The DA was executed in conjunction with the PUD and the PDP that was approved at the same time for a retail, entertainment, residential mixed-use project, today known as the Bay Street project. The existing DA, there are two things that are included in that, the minimum project and something called the additional project improvements. So the minimum project consisted of 100,000 square feet of retail entertainment area. The additional project improvements included another 150,000 square feet of retail, as well as 250 room hotel and 350 residential units. Out of all this, what has not been built is about a little over 16,000 square feet of retail and the hotel room. You'll note that the hotel now is reduced to 221. This is because the residential units that have been built are 379, and the DA allows for an exchange between the residential units and the hotel room. That's why the hotel room count has decreased, and the existing residential units which have been built has increased. Due to the current economic conditions, the applicant needs additional time to complete the remaining components of the additional project improvements, and that would be about 16,000 square feet of retail and the hotel. In terms of graphically, what is encircled in purple is the location of the Site A that has been built, and one in blue right here is the location, will be the location, or is the location of the unbuilt Site A, which is hotel, and this was the original location of the unbuilt hotel, and the remaining retail. Site B is north of that, bordering the bridge, the Powell Street Bridge, and will be the location of the future, we believe it to be a department store. This is not part of the redevelopment agreement, what I'm calling Site B. So it's only the purple and the blue. And the
is
blue
there
is not built yet.
And there's nothing left to be built in the purple.
That is correct.
That's all complete.
Right.
And is there a development agreement in place for Site B?
No.
And when does the city expect that to happen?
Did you say there was or was
There was not.
There isn't. We anticipate it when we have a project for Site B.
It's in negotiation though, isn't it?
we anticipated when
Well,
when we
we're
have
in
a project.
negotiations with Madison Marquette about the development of Site B. There may be a development agreement with that as well. We don't know at this point, but that hasn't been determined yet.
Maru, when we saw a proposal for the hotel concept, I don't know how long ago, a year ago or whatever, there was, I recollect that there was going to be some sort of high-end condominiums as part of that with the hotel. So now would it be exclusively just the hotel? Because I noticed there's a change in the number of hotel rooms. So, and I'm presuming that the residential has been built out, so there wouldn't be these condominium units as part of the hotel complex?
Let me give this a shot. Up until recently, we have been treating both the area circled in black there, Site B, as well as the blue area that is technically part of Site A that hasn't been built yet. We've been calling the whole thing Site B. So there's an overlap between Site B and Site A, which is the blue area. But, and there was a project that was being considered, or several different projects that were being considered and talked about, that would have covered both the blue and the black area and would have had a high-rise condominium, hotel tower, some retail,
Right, with a, like
bunch
a
of other
Nordstrom
stuff.
or something like that.
Right. At this point in time, the developer has opted to exercise the entitlements they already have for Site A, which includes the blue area there. The existing entitlements for Site A don't include any more residential units.
So it would
It
just
only
be the
includes the hotel and the retail that Miru was speaking of, and then what is truly Site B, not the part that overlaps Site A, would then become a retail development.
Okay, thank you,
Could
Charlie.
he transfer the hotel rooms into residential rooms as he did with part of old?
There's a
Site A?
limit on that. I think it was up to only a total of 50. 29 have already been transferred, so that only leaves 21 more.
So this developer has no prior rights to the Site B?
That's
No,
right.
the redevelopment agency owns Site B.
Right. So there's nothing entitled in this portion.
That will be coming to you in the future.
And
at some point.
Right. And what we anticipate that you will see in the future is the entitled hotel for which they have the entitlements. You'll be seeing the FTP, so you'll be looking at the design, and that will come to you and to the council for approval.
And retail.
And that along with the retail, which I mentioned, that it's about 16,000 square feet. And in addition to that, as a separate project on Site B, you may be looking at a department store, and that'll be a separate use permit. So they've kind of separated it out at this. That's what we're anticipating at this point. So right now, so what you have in front of you is for Site A, the extension of the development agreement for 5 years. And as I mentioned, they need this time because of the economic conditions. And they've been working on this, and you've been seeing over the last 5 years. I've been almost 5 years now, and I've been seeing different proposals. So
Is there some kind of a time schedule that they have to meet in this 5-year period?
they will have to build out the hotel and this.
Within the 5 years?
Right. If you approve the extension,
They're not required to,
but
they would like the development agreement to be extended for 5 more years, so that it gives them more leverage for negotiating with hotel operators.
I mean, clearly in the next couple of years, no hotels are going to be built. But we're giving them 5 years and hope we'll do it in 5 years.
Well, the development agreement simply locks in the entitlements, and they would only really need to get so far as getting their FDPs approved. They wouldn't have to complete the hotel necessarily.
So they own the property.
Yes.
So if we don't extend, then they have to come back with a new plan or something.
They own that piece of property?
Yes, they do. The development agreement does not, if you don't extend the development agreement, that does not take away their entitlements to the PUD, but the development agreement is a more firm commitment to the entitlements, and they would like that comfort level when they're talking to hotel operators.
So there isn't a hotel operator that's a serious consideration now in terms of at a negotiations point?
I
or-
have not been informed. You may ask that to the
You
applicant.
can ask, yeah, you can ask the applicant about that.
So if there were no more questions, then the applicant is here.
Well, I want to ask staff one more time. So is the blue area part of the original development area, development agreement area A?
Yes.
It is part of the
Yes,
original.
there is an approved PUD for the blue area. Here we go,
There
this
you go.
drawing here.
This is Site A that was approved in 1999. This is the hotel site. This is the portion of the retail. And out here is Site B, which used to have buildings, if you remember a few years ago.
Yes.
The flower shop.
I used to
and
buy
all.
flowers there. I really miss that it's not there anymore.
Sorry.
So the Site B confusion that incorporated the hotel site from A, that just was a vague reference to Site B because it included part of Site A?
It included the original, the great scheme that we saw about
Site
4
B.
years ago. You had a big hotel.
Right.
That hotel was bigger than the entitled hotel, so you would be what was in front of you was approving a portion of the hotel because 221 rooms were already approved. And then we were going to have it as the whole as a PUD. That's why we were calling it Site B. So they had always had the entitlement of the 221 room hotel and that little bit of retail. And anything additional, including a larger hotel, would be under your consideration.
And that's what we were considering at that point in time. It was
Correct.
much taller and incorporated the
Residential,
condominiums.
right,
Yeah.
If at the end of 5 years, nothing is built on this property, they still own the land.
They still own the land, they still have an approved
That is
PUD.
correct.
But their entitlement is gone, and they would
No,
No.
they still have the
No.
entitlement.
The development agreement.
The development agreement just locks it in a little more firmly. The development agreement, I believe, would prevent the city from rezoning that property to some other designation than PUD during that period.
So what's the purpose of what we're doing?
To extend it.
To lock it in.
So that I don't buy the entitlements for Madison Market and come and propose a hotel and, and retail. Because if there is no development, if you do not extend the DA and the entitlements still remain, it is possible for Madison to sell this piece of property along with the entitlements, and some other developer might come in and, seek an FTP for the entitled hotel and that retail.
They can still
Yes.
do that. That's still
yeah.
true. Yeah. I think it protects the developer from the city's rezoning the property to something other than the current PUD approval.
For 5 years. So
For
we
5
can't
years.
rezone it parks and open
I
space.
think the applicant might, and the applicant's attorney might be able to
It'd be
explain
a
all
great
this a little
park
bit better.
location, wouldn't it?
Kind of noisy.
Okay.
So the applicant would like to make
Applicant
a
wanna, make a
presentation.
comment?
Good evening. I'm Anna Shimko, Land Use Counsel for Madison Marquette here this evening. Actually, I think that Maru and Charlie have explained things quite brilliantly, so mostly I'm happy just to answer your questions. I was also here 10 years ago, as was Mike Biddle and probably some others in this room, when the project was originally approved. And Madison Marquette, I think we can all agree, has brought a wonderful, lively development to the city and would really like the opportunity to continue with the vision that was originally established for Site A. And as Charlie has quite eloquently explained, we do have the underlying entitlements of the planned unit development. And if the development agreement went away, could theoretically come in still and get a final development plan to exercise the rights under that PUD. However, in the meantime, not only the city, but anyone by initiative could seek to rezone and alter the allowed uses on that property. So having a development agreement for 5 more years that locks in the city's rules assists Madison Marquette with its very active with its efforts that are ongoing to find a hotel developer. It assists in getting a hotel developer, in securing financing, because the rules are firmly in place, and then we can guarantee that those rules will continue and the development can move forward. The obvious question is, what is the status of discussions with hotel developers? As we all know, the economy has not been at its height lately, and it is challenging. However, Madison Marquette has been in discussions and continues to be in discussions with potential hotel developers for the site. And that's really all we know at this point, is that we have made efforts, we will continue to make efforts, and fully expect to be able to make good on everybody's desire for that site to be developed. And
There was cleanup, I think, on that area of the site as well, not just the site B, but that part of site A, or am I incorrect?
I think there may well have been. The city would probably be better able to speak to that because that occurred before we took the property.
Oh,
Isn't that
okay.
correct, Mike?
I think it's
That's not part of the current Site B cleanup.
Right.
It is not?
No,
No.
Site A was
No.
already cleaned up.
Site A
Years
was,
ago.
yeah, that
It's
happened a
clean,
long,
it's
long time
done.
ago.
Okay. So in the interim, other than the big fence around it, does Madison Marquette have any plans over the course of the next 5 years, if you don't get a hotel, to do something that's more attractive and interesting, given that it's the entrance to Bay Street?
I'm not aware of any immediate plans. I mean, the plans have been to try and develop it, and that's been going on for quite some time. In 2005, Madison Marquette said, we have to get this whole thing approved this year.
Sure.
And that clearly didn't happen. So it's
I'm
been a
not-
challenge.
I'm not sure I understand it. If we extend this development agreement, this gives Madison Marquette the exclusive right to develop a hotel on this site.
No, I wouldn't put it that way. Madison Marquette owns this land.
Okay.
So any development that occurs on that site is going to be done by Madison Marquette because it's
Right.
owned in fee. So what the development agreement does is lock in place the rules, the zoning on the height, density, intensity, the uses, and it simply gives an added layer of certainty to help attract hotel developers and lenders to the project.
Well, let me ask from the city's point of view, what does the city gain from this? If we don't give you a development agreement, other developers may come with a more feasible use.
If they don't own it, the other
No,
developer doesn't
we own
own
the
it.
property, so that's not going to happen.
It can happen.
Right.
And why do you need a development agreement?
So they can negotiate with
It-
banks.
It's simply, again, it doesn't alter the zoning and the planned unit development, but it does lock in place the planned unit development and the rules, and it helps secure financing, it helps secure a hotel developer.
So the city won't change the zoning on you. and
Right, the city can't change the zoning, and no initiative can change the zoning.
I think from the city's perspective, what we get out of it is basically the same thing Madison Marquette gets out of it, which is
A developed site.
increased certainty, not certainty, but increased possibility that it might actually develop as the city originally approved it, which I think everybody wants.
It'd be a serious and willing developer that would be making this commitment to develop a hotel on that site.
Otherwise, a citizens' initiative could change the zoning on the property.
Correct.
Or the general plan committee could decide that they want to do something.
Suppose
That's right.
Suppose Madison Marquette decides in a year or two that they want to develop it, but not for a hotel. They've come up with some other use, like they want to make it all retail.
Sure.
And
At
that's
that
feasible.
point,
Do they have to come back to the city?
absolutely. At that point, they would have to come back to the city and amend the planned unit development plan, and it would all be before you. In addition, before we can even go forward with the hotel, as Maru mentioned, we will have to get a final development plan. So you will see all of that, and the city council will see all of that. But yes, if the uses were desired to be changed, then that would all be back before you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I move we approve it.
Well, we
Yeah,
need to have a
public
public
comment.
hearing.
We have a public hearing. I got to do my job. So let's see, we've heard from the developer. We're having a public hearing. Are there any members of the audience that would like to speak on this matter? Yes, sir. Would you please state your name?
Hi. Sure, I'm Ron Weller. I'm the general manager of Bay Street. And to answer your question, we do plan to use that site in the interim. That right now it's a paved parking lot. It was used for employee parking in the past. We're going to overlay that lot as soon as the remediation is finished. They're putting clean dirt back on Site B right now. That will be fenced between Site A and Site B. Right now, we're looking at several different uses, but we're also looking at special events for that area. And immediately, we do already have a commitment for a Christmas tree lot on that property, and there will be signage, and that fence will be opened up.
That's good. How about a playground?
How about a park?
You don't want to go there.
There are a couple of other uses that we're looking at in the interim, even before the Christmas tree lot
You
goes
know,
in there.
one thing that, and I know there's a cost issue, but, you know, I've seen some pretty interesting things with fence treatment during the interim where you can bring artists in and such that might be something you want to consider.
We're looking at
Yeah,
graphics
'cause
and everything else right
hopefully
now.
it'll be less than 5 years, but it could
Well,
be given the economy.
The commitment for the lot is this Christmas.
Okay,
So,
thank you so
okay.
much. With that, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for comments and suggestions.
I second
Anybody?
Commissioner Cardova's.
Pardon?
I'm seconding Commissioner Cardova's.
Did you move?
Move.
And you seconded. Any
Yes, sir.
comments?
Glad to hear you're going to do something in the interim.
Yes, absolutely.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Cardoza?
Aye.
Commissioner Flores?
Yes.
Commissioner Jeffrey?
Aye.
Commissioner Martin?
Aye.
Commissioner Sherman?
Aye.
Vice Chair, oh, I'm sorry. I'm going by the old list here. I don't know where I was, so I'll just continue. Commissioner Hoff, or Chair Hoff,
Here.
and
Yes.
Chair, and Commissioner Donaldson.
Yes.
I've got to rewrite my list. So anyway, 7 ayes, and this, I'm not sure if we mentioned this, this is by ordinance. So this goes for ordinance. So this goes forward to the city council, and we will bring the city council your recommendation that they adopt this ordinance.
Okay. Before we open the next public hearing, I'd like to ask a question. What happened to the Christie Street site?
Police building that we approved.
Maybe you could include that in your presentation.
This is Arlie's item. This is Arlie Cassidy's item, Assistant Planner Arlie Cassidy.
Well, we'll open the
making the
public hearing
presentation
then on the temporary police department.
We have to have staff report first.
Well,
Yeah.
don't you get this as part of the
Staff
public
report.
hearing?
That's first.
Yes, we're doing that
staff
item
report
next.
on the
Staff report,
temporary.
then the applicant, then the
Then
hearing.
I open the,
Right. This is just going to the item on the agenda.
okay.
It takes
Please.
a while, Art, to get it down.
Would you,
evening,
would
Chair
you
Hall.
explain why we have a new site?
I'll do my best. Good evening, commissioners. I am presenting to you the temporary police station for the second time. My understanding is that the original site on 64th and Christie was needed earlier than previously expected, and so
By the owner?
that's my understanding. And so the decision was made to not site the temporary police station there. Instead, we're now looking at Site B, which you may be familiar with. So this is an aerial map of the area. The cross hatches there represent the site of the temporary police station. You can see the Woodfin Suites as well as the Sheraton Hotel nearby. Site B continues to the south, and then the Powell Street Bridge is to the north. Here's a site plan. The parking spaces shown are obviously on the ground level. The Powell Street Bridge is shown in the dotted line above those parking spaces. So the site is going to front onto Shell Mound and will be flush against the Powell Street. So the building itself is in the center. We have some landscaping on the left, fronting on Shell Mound. There's a small area for visitor parking, which is along Shell Mound and under the Powell Street Bridge. After that, there's a gate which separates visitor from staff parking. Staff parking continues until the Powell Street Bridge kind of wall there, but it also wraps around the rear of the portable area. And as you can see below the building, there's a driveway out to Shell Mound as well for ease of access.
The parking shown here is 7 visitor parking spaces, which includes 1 handicap space. And there are also 3 bike parking spaces. And these are represented just below the G of visitor parking, the number 20. I don't know if you can make it out, but, oh, that's right. Let's see if this, I'll use the mouse. So this is where the bike parking would be, which is very close to the stairs shown here, going up to the front door. And then within staff parking, there are 23 spaces under the Powell Street Bridge, as well as 19 spaces behind the building. So let me correct my number in the staff report. I had not added in the 19 spaces. In my staff report, I said there were 23. They're actually 32. So that should bump that up. And there are also 2 bike parking spaces within the building adjacent to the rear door. Or there's, excuse me, a small room, which at least 2 spaces will fit within.
It's 42 spaces.
I'm sorry, bad math, 42 spaces, thank you. So this is the landscape plan along the front of the building with Shellmound Street to the bottom. This is the plan that was proposed at the time of the staff report. It shows a poured concrete ramp sloping up to the height of the portables. The portables sit about 3.5 feet above ground level on top of a foundation. And then this here is a walkway at kind of door level of the portables with stairs descending towards the visitor parking lot here. This would be sloped, and you can see the terraces in place here with landscaping and ground cover here. It was noted in our internal staff meeting that it would perhaps be wiser to save money on the landscaping, as this is a temporary site. And so it was suggested that a ready-made ramp, similar to ones you commonly see with portables, be placed here instead of the walkway and stairs. And I believe also suggested here. So this could be a walkway with stairs still, but there would be a ramp going to Shell Mound. And then this sloped dirt area could be hydro-seeded with wildflowers, for example. These were suggestions to save money again. So nothing very exciting here. They're portables. These show the elevations. This would be the west elevation facing Shell Mound with the front door, and then the rear door facing the railroad tracks. And this window, I believe, goes on to the interior bike parking room. A monument sign is proposed. If this is Shell Mound here and the building sits here, this is the proposed location of the monument sign. This is what it would look like, and it would have 2 faces, obviously, facing both north and south. These are pictures of the site as it is now. This is looking into where the visitor parking would be, as well as staff parking behind it. The portable would be to the right. This would be looking at the landscaped area and then the building here. And then this would be looking south from the portable area onto Shell Mound. And this is just the rear of the staff parking lot here. As far as conformity with standards, the safety services use requires a conditional use permit, which is what it's before you for now. The parking proposed, is 42. And all that's required is 23, given the square footage. This was calculated given a 3 per 1,000 square foot, which was recommended by the planning director, as there's no specified parking requirement for this use. And then the bike parking, both 2 spaces are required for both interior and exterior, and 3 are provided exterior, which is short term, and then at least 2 in the bike parking room, interior. No building setbacks are required. The building will have a front setback of 33 plus feet. It's 33, I think, and 2.5 inches at the minimum, and the Shell Mound is at an angle, so it becomes greater as that goes wider. And the fencing around the perimeter of the parking will be 8 feet throughout, and there are no fence height requirements in this area. So this concludes my presentation. Staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit and design review, subject to the conditions that were attached. One change that is suggested is that 24 months be allowed for the conditional use permit as opposed to the 18 months that were originally proposed in the staff report. In talking to the police department as well as Public Works, it sounds like this greater time period would allow for a little bit more padding as far as setting up the portable, moving in, and then having the renovations done on the existing police station. And then, in addition, I'm not sure if you have the handout. You should have an amendment to conditions of approval with you, and that contains 2 possible additions to the conditions of approval in relation to the landscaping and the possible alternative plan. So these have to do with the ramp as well as the hydro seeding, should you decide to vote that way.
So when do you anticipate that this would start? When are they trying to begin this process?
Well, I believe the process would begin as soon as it was approved. I don't know exactly how long the construction would take.
We have the architect here as well as a representative from Public Works and the police department who can answer your questions. Thanks.
You're done?
How long will it stay in use once it's?
Well, the plan is 9 months, but it could be longer, more than 9.
Hi,
never
Margaret
mind.
O'Brien. I'm in the Public Works Department. The renovation of the existing police station's scheduled to take 12 months. We're scheduled for occupancy of the portables in the end of March of next year, and we're planning to move back into the police station early May of 2011. So we need, and we don't know what's under the police station once we start with the renovations, which is why we'd rather have a 24-month instead of a, whatever the original 18-month was.
How long do you have on your schedule for constructing the portables?
Portables take about 3 months to construct, and the site plan is.
Actually, from when they get the notice to proceed until they turn over the.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Don Domer, architect. So from the time they get a notice to proceed until their portables are occupied was about 5 months. And in between that, we'll do the site development on a separate contract.
Is the fence on the north side next to the hotel going to be a solid fence?
It's going to be 8-foot galvanized chain link, and we were going to put slats in for privacy. So that would be the approach on all 3 sides.
There was something in the report that said that a policeman must start his siren before each shift for so many seconds.
That's simply a testing requirement of the.
Jeannie Kwan, commander of the police department, but
Speak
basically,
into the microphone.
Basically, before the start of each shift, and there's only 3 shifts, they just burst the siren for 1 second.
Well, it's
That's
only
it.
1 second.
Yes, it's
Oh.
only 1 second.
Okay,
This
thanks.
was true when you approved the use permit for
Right.
the project at 64th and Christie as well.
Right, and the shift times seem to be reasonable. Can you say the shift time starts again?
The shift time starts at 6 a.m., one starts at 2 p.m., and the other one is at 9 p.m.
So
So
it's not.
hopefully the fence might block some of the sound as well.
No, it won't.
You don't hear it
So,
now.
But it's not 2 a.m.
But I live a little crazy.
Is the 42 spaces what you have at the station now? Is that enough for staff cars and for police cars and
I
private
believe
vehicles?
It's very close.
It's
It might be
shift
1 or
changing.
2 over because we don't have the advantage of street parking, so.
And what's underneath the existing police station?
We don't know. We don't know what the sewer system looks like, so I just want to make sure we have enough padding should we go in there and, anytime you
Cover.
renovate a building, you get a surprise sometimes.
Okay.
So it's just making sure there's enough padding when we open a wall that we don't have are being forced to rush through.
Okay.
So is there a place for construction staging for these portables aside from in the street? Because that's a real traffic
Site B.
situation.
Site B.
Site B.
We
you're
have the
gonna
whole
do-
site,
You
yeah.
have the whole site, great.
So what I understand is they'll bring several at a time, and they have wheels and they're pulled by a semi-tractor, and they'll just pull them straight into the site and put them in place.
You'll have a foundation though, won't
Yeah, the foundations are these steel supports that you probably have seen at school sites, so it's very similar to that.
So what happens with these portables after 24 months? The city sells them, or?
Releasing them.
Oh, okay.
So they go back to the manufacturer.
And in terms of cost to the city for these portables, I assume you've exhausted all other alternatives for a existing structure. I mean,
We
what's-
have.
And the comparison for cost in terms of these portables compared to, say, the 64th Street Christie renovation?
The cost of the portables is more expensive than
But there's
the
no
rent
option
at
at
60,
this
but there's
point.
no option because we were on such a tight timeline. I mean, this is an outrageous project. The
Right.
schedule is incredibly
Right, okay,
compact as it was.
okay.
Thank you so much. So now I guess we open the public hearing. So would someone like to speak? Please. Maybe the city attorney.
Come on,
would have
Mike,
something.
yeah, Mike's here.
Come on. You're the only one left, Mike. So I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Would someone like to move approval?
Yeah, I'll recommend approval with the changes that staff has indicated in terms of the extension to 24 months and use of the
Hydroseed.
ramp, and the substituting hydroseeding for the landscape to save on costs.
Okay. Is
So
there a
I'll second.
Who seconded?
I do.
Okay.
Okay, you ready?
Call the roll.
I think I have you in the correct order now. Commissioner Cardoza?
Aye.
Commissioner Donaldson? Commissioner Jeffrey?
Aye.
Commissioner Martin?
Aye.
Commissioner Sherman?
Aye.
Vice Chair Flores?
Yes.
Chair Hoff?
Aye.
7 ayes, the application is approved. This decision may be appealed to the City Council within 15 days.
We're almost home. I guess the last item on the agenda is the amendment to the parking ordinance. And who's going to present that? Oh, you get double duty today. Huh?
Sense to get him.
Okay. Should I wait for Frank? Should I go ahead?
I guess, we ready?
Ready? Okay. So this presentation is in regards to some proposed language changes to Article 55 of the zoning ordinance, which has to do with off-street parking. So the goal of modifying this language was originally started because it was noted that a number of residents put quite a few cars on their private property, and so the idea was to limit how many cars could be parked or stored on yard space. So the way that we looked at this was to limit the number of cars that can be parked to the required parking. So for an example, a building that has 2 units, each with 2 spaces, each unit is required to have 1.5 parking spaces. This equals a total of 3. And that means that only 3 spaces would be allowed to be provided on the lot if these amendments go through. If that makes sense.
Would they have to be covered spaces?
Only as the code provides. So I believe the covered spaces are required for a single-family unit, a single-family dwelling unit, but not for any other multiple-unit homes. So I'm going to go through each kind of part of the language modification. First, just to explain further, I made this diagram. So currently, okay, let me explain this first. This is our sidewalk on a corner lot in gray. The light green are the required yards. So we have a 10-foot setback in front, 15 in rear, and 3 on each side, not to scale. The purple is our house. The dark green is additional open space. So this is space that's not covered by a building, but isn't a required yard or setback. And then here we have our driveway with 2 tandem spaces. which are permitted for a single unit. So right now, parking is not allowed in your front yard or your street side yard, but it is permitted in the rear yard, the interior side yard, or the open space. You have a minimum requirement, but no maximum. And so once the 2 parking spaces for this single family home, for example, are met, a person is allowed to fill the rest of this space with cars, should they want to. And so this zoning ordinance amendment would change that. It would say you still cannot provide your required parking in the front or street side yard, and in addition, you can only provide the required spaces somewhere within your interior side yard, your rear yard, or your open space. Are we clear on the diagram?
So we're going to a maximum number of spaces now rather than a minimum.
It's
Correct.
both. It's a single number,
It's a
which is
single
both the
number.
maximum and the
Between
minimum.
open space and required yards.
So a required yard is space that each property has to leave open. So for example, if I owned this property right here, I would be allowed to fill the space that's dark green with building if I wanted to. But sometimes it's not filled. So for example, this is often what a site would look like. They would have the required yard, but then they'd also leave other space open. That's what we're calling open
Not
space.
required.
Correct.
Yard is basically synonymous with setback.
Correct. So we're referring to this other space as open space. So this brings me to, there's 3 parts of change to the code. The first is in the zoning ordinance, section 9-4-319 under terms. O terms, number D or letter D is open space. Just to be clear, the new language is in italics and language we're deleting is underlined. Unfortunately, PowerPoint doesn't have strike through. So with this small piece of language is being modified only by adding the word required and taking away the word lot. So it will now read, open space shall mean the area of a lot which is not occupied by building coverage, required parking, or driveway. So as we saw in the previous area, that's all of this dark green.
Is there any requirement about parking only on paved?
I'll get to that.
So if you wanted to put an additional structure on your dark green, if you
Mhm.
wanted to put a bedroom, you could do it, but if you wanted to put an extra garage space for your extra car, you couldn't do it.
You could only provide the 2 spaces. So if, for example, if I had this property and I wanted to build a garage right here, then this or this could no longer be a parking space.
Can you
Well,
park in your driveway?
Not if it exceeds the 3 or the 2.
Well,
Open space by definition has no building on it. So if you built a garage, it wouldn't be open space anymore. But you'd still be limited to the number of spaces that are required and no more.
So in terms of the open space definition, you didn't include the required building setbacks. You specify building coverage, required parking and driveway, but you don't specify the setbacks.
This definition is already in the zoning ordinance. We're just changing one word of
I
it.
understand.
Aren't
but
we
isn't
in the
there some-
process of amending the zoning ordinance
Well,
as
yes,
part
we
of our
are.
general plan
We
update?
are, and that this may all get changed as a result of that. But open space is basically the area between the setback and the building.
But
So-
it's not captured in the change to this definition.
So you're
So
saying
if you
that
go
it-
back to
Well,
your
actually,
figure,
no, actually, when I read this definition, it includes the setback. It includes any part of the lot that doesn't have a building on it, including the setback area.
I would think so, but that was different than what the figure shows.
Well, the figure, she's simply trying to show the part that is open space, but that is not
Correct.
setback.
So technically, open space would be everything but the purple.
Well, let me,
second, the front green, the front dark green, you
This-
could build on, so you could park up to that edge, couldn't you?
if you built a garage. See,
Right, and then you
well,
couldn't park
let
on
me-
the
let me-
side
let me
because
try
you
to-
would take up your allotted spaces.
let me try to explain. using this diagram, part of the problem. The current zoning ordinance says you cannot park in your front setback area, period. So whatever's required for a front setback, you can't park there. But if the house is set farther back than what the setback requires, you have some area in the front of the house that's considered open space, but it's not within the setback. You could park a car there.
If it fits, yeah.
If it fits, you could park a car there. So the purpose of this, one of the purposes of this code amendment is to clarify that we're not just talking about the setback area, we're talking about the entire space in front and rear and side. So we think the restriction of front setback is a little bit of a loophole that we're trying to close so that people can't park in front of their house, period.
In your example, these 2 parking spaces are outside. They're uncovered.
Yes.
Yep.
But they could just as well have a roof over them.
Pardon?
It-
But they could have been underneath the building.
Yep.
Correct.
My question is this a little unduly restrictive? Let's say I'm rather affluent and I have 3 cars. And I have 2 cars parked under the building.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to put another car out here, and it's well landscaped and it's not, doesn't look bad.
Wouldn't
Under
see it.
your proposal, I could not have a 3rd car on my
Right.
lot.
Correct.
Isn't that unduly restrictive?
That's what we're here to discuss.
Well,
And can't we make it subject to, say, staff review that it's not a blighting influence?
Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
This came from the Community Preservation Committee. It's a concern that this committee has had for several years, that they have been asking staff to do something about for several years. Mainly it's the blighting influence of cars parked on front lawns and tucked in the sides between fences and houses in various portions of the residential neighborhoods of Emeryville. So we've been directed basically by the Community Preservation Committee to come up with a zoning ordinance amendment that puts tighter restrictions on where people can park outside. Now, one thing I would like to note is that it's a little bit nuanced. The restriction here applies to open space and yard areas. What we're saying is you can't have more than the required number of parking spaces in your open space and yard area. Otherwise, people could park, 5, 6 cars there. But if you had 3 cars and you had a 3-car garage, or you had a house that had 3 car spaces under it, that would not be in the open space and yard area. It would be enclosed. So that you could do, but we wouldn't allow you to then park another car out in the yard, because then you'd be exceeding the required number of spaces, and we don't want that outside. That's the point.
But my point is, you have a property with a very large yard, and the 1 extra car, it would not be considered a blighting influence. Can't we make an exception?
I would suggest, if you want to do that,
Let me
that
see
there should be some discretion, and it should be a use
This situation,
permit.
let's say there's nothing underneath the house, and you're saying because there's 2 cars outside, he can't have a 3rd car.
You could have a 3rd car under the house.
No, but not.
Oh, actually, no, well,
No, you couldn't.
then you'd have more than the required number outside.
But
That's
if you
true.
had
No, you
2
couldn't. That's true.
parking garages underneath, then you could have a 3rd car outside?
No,
Could not.
no, not if you
That to
exceeded
me
the
is
number.
unduly
If you had
restrictive.
3 parking places underneath.
You could
You
have.
could have 3
Yeah, you
parking.
could have 5 underneath.
As long as we don't have to look at them.
Oh, okay.
That's
well,
the
that
idea.
I think we should give the planning director some discretion for situations that are not blighting.
Would the planning director then be reviewing I think part of the problem with determining blight is what kind of car it is, right? So if it's an old car, the planning director would say it's a blight. If it's a new car, it wouldn't be. I think that would be kind of a problem for staff.
I would suggest that if you want to make this more flexible, until we get a minor conditional use permit procedure, which we hope to get sometime, which would be a planning director use permit, which we don't have now, that this be a use permit and come to the planning commission, and you can decide on a case-by-case basis if you think that it's okay to have the additional cars outside.
Well, most of the problems are non-operating vehicles that are just dumped on the properties, aren't they?
No, no.
And we have people that are parking like 4 and 5 cars just right
So
in front of their.
if-
It's
if-
really a tool for the code enforcement officer.
Yeah, okay, so what would happen then is that when there's a complaint,
Right.
the code enforcement officer would now have the authority to go and cite them.
Right.
Right, we're not planning to do a comprehensive sweep of the neighborhoods and tell everybody to get rid of their cars. This would be on a case-by-case, complaint-driven code enforcement basis.
Well, if you got a bunch of neighbors all around there and they're all doing it, you're not going to get any complaints, so what's the point?
Well, if there are complaints, they can do it, so it gives them the opportunity.
So are you
I don't
suggesting
think
that
this is,
when a complaint is
understand
filed,
the
it comes before
concern.
the planning commission for consideration?
No, not necessarily, no. I'm just saying that if you want to allow some discretion to allow greater or fewer number of cars, the criteria for that have to be fairly tightly drawn, I think. And that typically is a use permit kind of a situation, or a variance. In either case, under the current code, only the planning commission has the authority to approve use permits and variances. Unless, unless we can make it very specific, measurable, with no judgment involved. You know, if the distance is X and the site is of a certain size or whatever, and it's something that the staff can easily determine with a calculator, that I would say we could do at a staff level, but if it requires a discretionary approval, the only thing that we have the discretionary authority to do right now is design review, which we do, but I think this falls outside of design review. Although, I suppose you could put it in that camp.
So how do we get discretion? What's your recommendation?
I mean,
Well.
it doesn't sound like the commission wants to have it go as a use permit.
Nope.
no.
So
I
Well,
don't
we-
think we want
As
to be
another
looking at whether
alternative.
whether cars are causing blight on.
right.
Well, you may
property.
recall that Carol Handelman came before you for a variance so that she could park her car in her front yard, because the current code prohibits that. You gave it to her, came out pretty nice, but that had to be a variance approved by the commission.
So
I
we-
don't have a
But she
problem
did
with this.
something with a nice design, too. I mean, she was responsible about
No,
how she
my
was
point
going
is that it was a commission decision because it was a
Yeah, I
variance.
understand.
But the,
So
I just
procedurally,
don't
we
think-
need to go through the public hearing, and then we go through the
That's true.
discussion. So smack that gavel and
Well,
open that
actually,
public hearing.
Arlie is not quite
Oh,
done
okay.
with the.
Sorry,
Oh,
Arlie,
okay.
we
yet.
cut her
Oh,
off.
I was wondering why you were standing there still.
So I basically went through the changes. The first, as we discussed, is open space modification. The next is actually a bit of change, and you also have all of these changes printed out in front of you, parking ordinance update, in case you want to look at them. So the changes here is that under location of required spaces, it shows here that we deleted subsection 2. In fact, we just kind of reincorporated it within the italics. It's now 2II, 2 I don't know how to describe that. So the first subsection that you're looking at here is talking about how it would go into effect. So once the ordinance was effect, it would apply to all existing yards and parking spaces. It would be true for all property in the city. It would not be only triggered by new development. Then subsection 2 is just a restating of what the code says now. Off-street parking should not be provided in front yards, street side yards, and areas providing ingress and egress to other parking spaces except for tandem. Subsection 3 talks about the need to meet design standards. And so you were mentioning, Commissioner Cardoza, about paving and things like that. Our design standards do talk about surfacing and mention, I believe it's a best faith effort to have as much permeable paving or porous surfaces as possible. So that would be something to be aware of and to let people know about. And then subsection 4, again, acts to make all of our current minimums also maximums. And that applies to both the number of spaces as well as the dimensions of these spaces.
Excuse me.
And then the last section refers to Title VI, Health and Sanitation in the municipal code. Currently, there's a reference to the parking section of the zoning code, and so we just make it consistent. We modified the text there to what's in italics, just so that this code falls in line with the suggested modifications.
Oh, Jim, you know,
Could
there's
you address the comments by Mr. Getz in his letter
Yes.
and explain it to us?
So it's in talking with Charlie, it sounds like Mr. Getz is mostly concerned with how this would apply to non-residential spaces. And so on this slide here, we suggest that this amendment could be slightly modified to apply only to the medium density residential districts. That's what kind of sparked this in the first place, is making sure that the RM districts don't look blighted, don't have cars parked on the yards. And I'm not aware of anyone feeling that this is an issue in other zones. So that would release the other zones from this restriction on minimum stall widths and lengths, et cetera, while continuing to enforce it in the area where there seems to be a problem.
There's an apartment building on Jim Martin Street, across the street and up a little from you, that has the front area is where the parking is. It's a horrible building, but that's the only parking for it, is in the front yard.
At that 4-unit complex, yeah.
Or it's 8 units, isn't it, or something?
4, yeah.
But that's all there is. Now, would
Oh,
those
that
peop-
one, yeah. Then there's an 8-unit one too, yeah.
Would
So,
those people be out of business, or what
We've
happened?
got to follow procedures here. Is that the end of your report?
That's the end.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Now, we're going to open the public hearing.
Well, I've got some questions for staff first.
Oh, okay.
So in, under item 2, II, it says off-street parking shall be not provided in the front yard, side street yards, or areas providing ingress or egress to other parking spaces except for except for tandem parking as provided below. Where is there any reference to tandem parking below?
Tandem parking is not referenced in the text that we'd be modifying. I did provide all of you with a copy of the parking ordinance, Article 55. So if you wanted to look at it, tandem parking is referenced the next page over on page 9-90.
Under which section?
Under off-street parking, so we're in Article 55, which starts on the first page of the packet. And then if you flip the page over, and in the middle of the left column, number 4, it says that any residential lot, tandem parking is permitted on the planning director's determination that the entire lot or a separate area within the lot is exclusively reserved for the use of the residents. The tandem spaces are individually and clearly identified, and the tandem pairs of spaces are assigned to the same unit.
And this language that's in here is already in the code.
Right.
We're just rearranging it a little bit.
So subsection II, you can see, is also the exact same language that's underlined. The only reason we deleted it is so we could rearrange the order of it.
Right.
So then in section 6-1G, where we're deleting the allowance for parking in the driveway strip in front of the garage, which is, we've actually approved a lot of projects in the last 5 years that had that very solution.
Where are you referring, Jim?
On the last page of the edits, we're deleting an allowance that says, except when such vehicles are parked on a drive approach to a required garage or on a permitted off-street parking space. So basically, if there's room to fit a car in front of the garage, you're allowed to park there under the existing code, but we're deleting that provision. So where are we going to allow for that continued practice under these changes?
Well, you're referring to the part that's in the Health and Sanitation Code?
Yes.
That provision is in conflict with the existing zoning ordinance.
But it's consistent with what we've approved in the last how many years? I mean, look, I can think of several projects where that's how they solve the parking There's a project over near the senior
Salem
center.
Court?
Yeah. With the arbor up in front and the row of
I
garages.
thought all the
that-
parking was inside the garage there,
No, there's room to fit a car in front.
but is that required?
It was part of what we considered when we looked at the project.
Huh.
Wasn't there a back unit that didn't have, I mean, it was for one of the
No, they all.
I thought they
three
were
of the
all, they were
units-
all one-bedroom units, weren't they? So they required 3 parking spaces and there were 3 garages? I'm not remembering. Well, in
There
any
was
event,
I think there's enough room to fit a car in front, and I think they're.
well,
do-
there
they're
may
using
be,
it.
but they're not supposed to park there.
Well, in actual practice, most of the garages are used for storerooms, and they park the car in the driveway.
Right. We don't have anything in
I
our
guess my
code.
point is, that it's
Park in
happened.
their driveway than on the street, you know? I mean, I don't,
Well,
it's a paved area. I can see if people are parking on grassy areas that are now, muddy messes, but I don't see it as a blighting problem to be able to park in your driveway. I mean,
So one of the findings that if it was complaint driven and it went to the Community Preservation Committee and it was referred to the code enforcement officer, one of the findings that she would have to make is that it would be blighted. So in the case of someone parking in their driveway with their, nice or operable car, she probably wouldn't make that finding of blighted and go through the very specific processes of
Right, but-
citing and
but
having
the-
it referred to the city attorney's office and going to court with warrants. I mean, it's a very, specific, determined process.
well, even if we don't make these changes, the current code says, can you go back, Arlie, to the previous slide? Yeah. Off-street parking shall not be provided in front yards meaning the front yard setback.
Mhm.
And that can include the drive, well, except for, wait a minute. And areas providing ingress and egress to other parking spaces except for tandem parking as provided below.
There was some other reference in the code to accept driveways too. So I think that this needs a little bit more thought and more work. I'm not comfortable with it. the way
Okay,
it
well,
is.
we can say you can park in your driveway. In fact, maybe we should loosen up the existing language a little bit to say that driveways that meet the standards, the design standards, it's okay to park in.
I think we should have a general review.
I think we need to see if anybody wants to.
Public
say
hearing.
anything in the public
Oh.
hearing.
Arlie's all finished now,
Are
right?
you done with questions?
Oh, we haven't done that yet, have
We're
we?
done with the damn questions
Done
yet.
with the staff. Thank you. Don't go away. Okay, we'll
After the public hearing, we'll have lots of
open the
questions.
public hearing. Mike, where are you?
close the public.
Mike left.
We'll close the public hearing. Now we will bring it back to the commission.
Well, I'm confused.
I would like to say that I think this is throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and I really feel we need some type of appeal process. And I gather the staff is not anxious to make these Solomon-like decisions, so maybe it has to come to the commission.
No, I think
Well-
we need to rework this language. It needs to go back to staff for reconsideration.
We struggle with this, and I have to say this is the best we could come up with. Perhaps if we think about it some more, we can come up with something that works better. But the basic idea is that people aren't parking on lawns, squeezing cars into spaces between houses and fences. Just the kind of thing you see all over the residential neighborhoods. If the
Well, can't
commission-
we spell that out and just say that?
And I think
Well-
I do think the wording needs to be redone, because if you have, an extra car under an arbor on the off of the street side where nobody is bothering
Right.
anybody, I don't think it makes sense to have it written in a code someplace that's
Not
against the
allowed.
law.
Yeah.
Would
It
you-
just doesn't make sense.
And then
It
if it's a
seems
nice car, it's
overly
okay, and if it's a
restrictive.
junker, it isn't. I mean, I have a problem with that too.
Would you agree that any parking space must be designed to the standards of the code, and impermeable surface, all
Yes.
that kind of thing? Now, Mike, so therefore, if you're parking just on your lawn, that would not be allowed because that's not a
and
I
design.
think maybe you have something on surfacing and you get more restrictive in the use between, the visible side from the street.
Yeah.
But what people put in their backyard, I mean,
Who cares if it's gravel?
Yeah.
But at
Okay.
least
Well, that's
It
right.
shouldn't have to be. I just think it's excessive. I understand the need to control this. We need some teeth in this, but not to the point where you have a minimum and a maximum that's the same number. If somebody's got a large enough yard and they're maintaining their property, they should be allowed to do that, but we need to have, whether it's 1 or 2 cars over the minimum based on the lot size or some other variable.
Okay.
I don't feel that this clarifies things any. In fact, I'm more than confused.
All right.
So
I
I'd
guess
like-
my concern is that if you allow them to park as many cars as they want, as long as they're surfaced properly, potentially they could just pave over the whole.
Yeah, no, we don't want
lot.
that.
No.
No.
Well, I don't know how you control that.
By
Although-
setting the maximum 1 or 2 cars above based on maybe lot size or number of units, but have something more than the minimum and maximum the same number.
And decent parking surfaces.
Right, yeah. Okay, well, we'll go back and work on it and bring it back to you.
So,
They're gonna work on it.
I guess, are we supposed to take a vote on this?
You don't need to take any action. I mean, I think we have direction
We
from the
just refer
commission.
it back to the staff for further
Sure.
consideration.
Yeah.
Fine.
Okay, that's what we'll do.
Did you want to say something more, Arlen? Okay.
Commissioners' comments. Any commissioner would like to comment?
Let me think.
Welcome to the chair position, Art.
And we're gonna switch chairs next time.
Yeah.
So Frank is toward the center, and we got all this worked out.
I want
bookend over
instructions on what to tell the council about the mini mart.
Oh, you'll figure that out.
Thanks. Okay.
We have full faith in you, Art.
No other commissioner comments? The meeting is adjourned.